Chapter 1775. The ancestor fiend celestial looked down at Ji Tianqing. His expression and tone were full of contempt. Ji Tianqing's heart was burning with rage, surging with violent killing intent. However, his strength was weak, and one of his arms had been chopped off. He was already at the end of his rope. He looked up angrily at the ancestor fiend celestial. While emitting killing intent, he was also puzzled. He actually called me Kenshin? How can this be? He is an ancient fiend celestial from 30,000 years ago, while Kenshin is an unparalleled expert from 1,000 years ago. The two of them have no connection at all. Just as he was feeling puzzled, the ancestor fiend celestial slowly raised his left palm, releasing a few pitch-black cold light blades, which stabbed down from the sky. Swish, swish, swish. Ji Tianqing wanted to dodge, but he could not. He was stabbed by the light blades, and fell to the ground with blood spurting out from his body. A few bloody holes appeared on his chest, back, and legs, and the bones inside could be clearly seen. A heart-wrenching pain spread throughout his body, causing him to convulse and curl up. Ka-keek! The ancestor fiend celestial laughed sinisterly, and said in a disdainful tone, "Indeed a piece of trash that can't even withstand a single blow. What a disappointment! I don't understand. Just based on your abilities, how can you protect this continent and its billions of people?" As he said that, the ancestor fiend celestial moved his finger again, and a blood light covered the sky. The dark red blood light condensed into light blades, and like a rain of arrows, they rained down and enveloped Ji Tianqing. Swish, swish, swish. The blood light flashed, and the sky collapsed. Ji Tianqing was also pierced into a sieve by the bloodlight blades, and his body was covered with hideous wounds and bloody holes, with blood gushing out like a fountain. Furthermore, his body had been chopped into two, and mixed with the blood mud, looking extremely miserable. After suffering such heavy injuries, Ji Tianqing was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. His soul was also in pain, and his consciousness was blurry. Once his consciousness fainted, he would fall into a deep sleep, and might never wake up again. He tried his best to hold on and roared in his heart, "No! I can't die, no matter what, I can't fall. Even if I die, I will drag the ancestral devil god down with me." Relying on his strong willpower, he managed to hold on and didn't faint on the spot. The two halves of his body wriggled gently and slowly gathered together. He wanted to reconstruct his body. Seeing how tenacious his life force was, the ancestor devil god couldn't help but grin. Ha! Ants will always be ants. No matter how humiliating and painful it is, it still has to drag out an ignoble existence. However, I will not give you a chance. Accept your destruction in despair. The ancestral demon god sneered as he raised his left foot that was as large as a mountain and stomped down. The pitch-black giant foot descended from the sky like a huge mountain. It was about to trample Ji Tianqing into powder. At the moment of life and death, Ji Tianqing tried his best to look up at the sky and roared unyieldingly, "No! This can't be true. I will never lose to you." Even though the illusion was so real that it was hard to tell if it was real or fake. However, he suddenly realized that this was definitely not true. The ancestral demon god had already recovered to become a god, but he still had the strength of a tribulation transcendence realm cultivator. This was impossible. The difference in strength between the two of them couldn't be so great. It just called me Kenshin. Yes, I am not Ji Tianqing. I am Kenshin, the divine king that ascends to the 9 heavens and rules over 10,000 gods. Ji Tianqing let out a furious roar. Every drop of blood, every pore, and every hair in his body began to burn. The two halves of his body ignited with golden flames and quickly fused into a ball. In the next moment, the golden sacred flames condensed and formed into an 8 feet tall, holy and dignified man in a white robe. The ancestral demon god's giant foot also stomped down on him, causing an earth-shattering explosion. Boom! Following the deafening explosion, Ji Tianqing's figure was drowned out. The ground within a radius of 100 miles was crushed by the gigantic foot, and a gigantic abyss appeared. However, after the ancestral demon god moved his foot away, he looked at the ground in astonishment. A young man in a white robe was holding a pitch-black divine sword and standing majestically above the abyss. This person was tall and had a handsome and resolute face. His eyes were as bright as the stars. His long hair was tied up with a green hairband and a silver belt was tied around his waist. He wore a pair of simple black cloth shoes. At first glance, he looked very plain. However, he exuded a holy and dignified aura that could not be blasphemed. He was also surrounded by formless divine power. He was Kenshin. The ancestral demon god looked at Kenshin before lowering his head to look at the back of his foot. He saw that there was a huge bloody hole in his foot. The pitch-black demonic blood was gushing out like a fountain and spilling into the abyss. The ancestral demon god was instantly enraged. He raised his fists and punched out with a monstrous black light towards Kenshin. "You reptile, go to hell." Kenshin looked at the ancestral demon god indifferently. His left hand was behind his back and his right hand was holding the sword of burial of heaven as he slashed out 3 heaven-splitting swords. Bam bam bam. The 3 heaven-splitting swords with resplendent golden light slashed at the ancestral demon god. He was sent flying backwards. His left ankle was severed and there was a huge bloody hole in his right leg and chest. After flying for 100 miles, it finally smashed into the wasteland with a loud boom, shattering the ground into pieces. Before he could get up, Kenshin had already teleported 100 miles away and chased after him with his sword. "Evil demons, everyone has the right to kill you." Kenshin shouted emotionlessly as he swung his sword at the ancestral demon god. "White Tiger Sacred Sword." The huge sword cut through the sky and brought along an illusory white tiger shadow, instantly engulfing the ancestral demon god. Bam! The ancestral demon god's right leg was severed again. Countless wounds appeared all over his body as dark purple demonic blood spurted out. The sudden reversal of the battle situation and the heart-wrenching pain made the ancestral demon god furious. He roared at the top of his lungs. "Ah! You despicable worm, you ant-like thing, how dare you bully this god? This god will fight it out with you." As he roared, the ancestral demon god launched a counterattack. Blood light and black fog covered the sky and covered a radius of 1,000 miles. Kenshin was fearless. He used the Big Dipper constellation steps and held the sword of burial of heaven in his hand. He used a superb sword technique that had reached perfection. No matter how much blood light and demonic aura approached him, they were blocked by the sword light and could not get close. The two of them fought in the sky above the wilderness for a full 15 minutes before the battle came to an end. The sky within a radius of 1,000 miles had been shattered and densely packed cracks appeared in the void. The wilderness had turned into ruins and was filled with ravines and holes. Kenshin was still in his snow-white robe and was not injured at all. As for the ancestral demon god, 5 of his arms and wings had been severed. His legs had been blasted into smithereens. Chapter 1776. After the ancestor demon god was defeated and fled, the millions of demon race troops also retreated like the tide. Kenshin stood quietly in the sky and closed his eyes, revealing a look of pain. The power in his body quickly dissipated, and a strong sense of weakness and exhaustion attacked him, causing him to immediately fall into a coma. Swoosh! In a daze, Ji Tianqing's consciousness gradually returned to him. Although his body and consciousness were still very tired, he slowly opened his eyes and saw the scene in front of him clearly. He was surrounded by boundless darkness, and there was only a path shining with stars under his feet. Upon closer inspection, the straight and wide path was surprisingly formed by the convergence of thousands of stars, like a silver-white waterfall. Ji Tianqing looked around and discovered that there was nothing in the dark void other than the path of stars. He immediately understood that he was still in the dream realm, and the mental demon tribulation had not ended. He followed the path of stars under his feet and walked forward, into the depths of the void. Time in the void seemed to pass extremely slowly, and the scenery around him never changed. He did not know how long he had been walking for, until he saw a towering platform at the end of the path of stars. Therefore, he quickened his pace and rushed over, curiously sizing up the platform. The huge platform seemed to be formed by stars, and it was gold and silver in color, containing a majestic divine aura. The path of stars was connected to the platform, and there were a total of 9,999 steps on the platform, which was a total of 10,000 feet high. Ji Tianqing came closer, and after observing for a while, he stepped onto the steps. He clearly saw that every step was engraved with dense seal characters, recording a vast amount of complicated information. There was the truth of martial arts, as well as the world of one's home country, as well as the wind and clouds of heaven and earth, as well as the vast and boundless sea of stars. However, he could not understand most of the content, as it was too profound and bizarre. Moreover, his attention was not on his feet. He could vaguely see that at the top of the platform, there was a white figure standing tall. Not long after, he stepped on nearly 10,000 steps and finally arrived at the top of the platform. In front of him was a platform with a radius of 300 meters. The ground was as bright as jade, and it was suffused with the brilliance of the stars. An 8-foot-tall figure in a white robe was standing quietly on the high platform. With his hands behind his back and his back facing Ji Tianqing, he stared into the vast void as if he was thinking about something. Ji Tianqing was no stranger to this unique figure. Kenshin. He raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but call out. The white-robed figure was awakened. He ended his contemplation and slowly turned around. His face was handsome and resolute, and his eyes were as deep and vast as the starry sky. He wore a green hairband on his head, a silver jade belt around his waist, and a pair of black cloth shoes on his feet. It was undoubtedly Kenshin. He looked at Ji Tianqing calmly and said in a leisurely tone, "I have waited for 1,000 years. You have finally come." Ji Tianqing frowned and looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" Kenshin didn't explain. He looked at him deeply and said in a gratified tone, "In a short 25 years, you were able to attract the heavenly tribulation. It seems that my painstaking efforts were not in vain. With such an unprecedented growth speed, you will definitely shock the universe and make all the gods bow down to you." Kenshin muttered to himself and said in a regretful tone, "It's a pity that my memories haven't been fully awakened, and my potential hasn't been fully stimulated. I am still ignorant to this day." Ji Tianqing was even more confused when he heard Kenshin's words. He couldn't help but ask, "Senior Kenshin, could it be that you arranged for me to receive your inheritance 1,000 years ago? What is the relationship between you and me?" The sword god was startled by his question, and then an expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry appeared on his face. "Sigh, I'm really crying because of you. Because of my own stupidity. Now that things have come to this, don't you have an answer in your heart?" Many images of Kenshin appeared in Ji Tianqing's memories. And now, this was the first time he saw Kenshin smile. Of course, Kenshin's words shocked him even more. "You mean I am you?" Ji Tianqing's pupils constricted and he stared at Kenshin. His heart was in his throat. Kenshin frowned slightly. After thinking for a while, he shook his head. "Your words are both correct and incorrect. I am only me, and I am also the current you. But you are not only you." These two sentences were so specious that it was hard to fathom them. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a while before he came to a realization. "I understand now. You are Kenshin, and you reincarnated into me. And I am not only Kenshin, but also Ji Tianqing." Kenshin revealed a gratified expression and nodded slightly. "That's right, that's exactly the case. I am Kenshin, and I only have Kenshin's memories. And you are not only me, but also the #1 prodigy Ji Tianqing. You are even more monstrous than me." After receiving Kenshin's confirmation, Ji Tianqing finally unlocked the shackles in his heart and pushed aside the layers of fog. He looked at Kenshin with a burning gaze and asked impatiently, "You have already fallen for 1,000 years. How can you talk to me across space?" Kenshin knew that he was full of doubts and explained, "As the king of gods, not only is I powerful, but I also have the ability to change the heavens and change the earth. Before I fell, I had already prepared the corresponding plan and was only waiting for my rebirth 1,000 years later. I did something to the heavenly tribulation lightning. You will only understand all of this when you undergo the tribulation." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and praised in disbelief. "As expected of the king of gods, you can actually do something to the heavenly tribulation." Kenshin said with a calm expression, "Praising yourself like this doesn't seem too modest." Ji Tianqing smiled and continued to ask, "I want to know, since you have already become the king of gods, why did you fall? And why did you fall?" Kenshin's eyes dimmed, and he said in a low voice, "The path of martial arts and the path of godhood are endless. There is always a higher mountain. As for the mystery of my fall, it is still too early for you to investigate it. When you ascend to the upper realm and become strong enough, you will naturally find the answer." Ji Tianqing nodded and asked again, "Then what secrets are hidden in the tombs of Yin and Yang that you left behind?" "A secret that can make the entire world go crazy," Kenshin answered. Ji Tianqing asked again, "In Kenshin's tomb, I found a super formation that seemed to have been passed down from ancient times. What kind of formation is that?" Kenshin said in a serious tone, The god-slaying sword formation, a relic from the desolate era. I have studied it for many years and still have not been able to fully understand it. Ji Tianqing had countless questions in his heart and wanted to ask Kenshin more. However, Kenshin raised his hand to stop him and said in a serious tone, "Whether it is martial arts or recovering your past memories, you have to do it step by step. You cannot be impatient, otherwise, there will be a great disaster. I do not have much time left. I will help you awaken a part of your memories first." Chapter 1777. Swoosh. The white light entered Ji Tianqing's forehead and quickly integrated into his sea of consciousness. Vast and mighty information poured into his divine soul like a surging tide. He was dizzy from the impact, and his consciousness was a little blurred. He could only sit cross-legged on the high platform and refine the memories. Kenshin looked at him faintly and murmured in a low and sonorous voice, "100 tribulations, 1,000 tribulations, since ancient times, I will defy the heavens. After 100 years, I will definitely make a comeback and reach the peak again." As his voice fell, his body also turned into a ray of mysterious white light and entered Ji Tianqing's body, and soon merged with it. The surrounding void returned to darkness and calmness, and the stars on the high platform were still shining. Ji Tianqing was unaware of all this. He was immersed in his sea of consciousness and focused on refining Kenshin's memories. In the sea of fire in the flaming mountain. Half a day had passed, and the tribulation cloud vortex above the ruins had not dissipated yet. Ji Tianqing, dressed in a white robe, was still wrapped in the bloody light and quietly suspended in the sky. Dozens of miles away, Yun Yao was hiding in the reverse water divine sword. She was already a little anxious from waiting. She looked at Ji Tianqing with worried eyes and murmured secretly, "Half a day has passed. Why hasn't Ji Tianqing succeeded in passing the tribulation? Could it be that he has encountered some trouble? There are already several groups of powerhouses watching. If the tribulation doesn't end, I'm afraid there will be unexpected problems." On the other side, in the sky hundreds of miles away from Ji Tianqing, Grandma Jean, the middle-aged woman, and Ronger were also waiting anxiously, showing a puzzled look. Ronger asked Grandma Jean worriedly, "Grandma, that young master's inner demon tribulation has been going on for half a day. Will he be okay?" Grandma Jean clenched her golden walking stick and said with a solemn face, "Grandma has not passed the inner demon tribulation. How can you know the mystery? However, a inner demon tribulation lasting for half a day is really unusual. I'm afraid that young master is in trouble." Hearing her words, Ronger's eyes became more and more worried, and her mood became heavier. The middle-aged woman hurriedly comforted her. "Ronger, don't worry. That young master is comparable to the Kenshin. He will definitely be able to turn misfortune into blessing." "I hope so." Ronger nodded and prayed silently. Night Crow and the bandits were hiding in the sea of fire in the southwest corner of the ruins. Everyone stared at Ji Tianqing, who was standing on top of the ruins. They were already filled with anxiety and impatience. The bandits urged Night Crow telepathically like ants on a hot pan. "Second Master, that brat hasn't moved for a long time. Are we still going to wait here?" "That's right, Second Master. Our brothers have all suffered heavy injuries. We just want to get rid of that brat as soon as possible and find a place to heal. The longer we stay in the sea of fire, the more our magic power will be consumed, and our injuries will worsen. If that kid drags on for another half a day, we won't have much of our strength left. Second Master, you have to make a decision quickly. Wasting time like this is not the way to go." How could Yi Ya not be anxious and worried? But in order to be cautious, he had endured until now. After being urged by the bandits, he gradually lost his patience. "The First Master sent me a message earlier. They have already found the hiding place of the glazed fire dragon. Many powerhouses have surrounded the lair of the glazed fire dragon. I'm afraid they will take action soon. The First Master urged us to rush over to help as soon as possible. We can't delay our work," Night Crow said in a low voice. With a dignified expression he ordered, "Now that things have come to this, we really can't wait any longer. That brat is going through the tribulation. He can't even protect himself and has no power to resist. You guys go now and kill him as fast as you can. If he succeeds, he will become the #1 genius of the continent. It will be difficult for us to get rid of him then." Hearing this order, the 5 bandits were stunned. They looked at each other, but no one dared to agree. Second Master, are we going to rush over and kill him just like that? If we do it now, we will definitely enter the range of the tribulation. Even if we can kill that brat, we will be killed by the tribulation. Outsiders can't interfere with the tribulation. Otherwise, they will be punished by the heavens. This is the consensus of the martial arts world. Seeing that the bandits were full of hesitation and didn't dare to take action, Nightcrow suddenly became angry. Bastard! You dare to disobey my order? Outsiders can't interfere with the tribulation. It means that they can't help the person going through the tribulation resist the heavenly thunder. You are going to kill that brat, not help him go through the tribulation. How can you be punished by the heavens? Since I sent you to do it, I will definitely not let you die. After hearing Nightcrow's explanation, the bandits' doubts were dispelled a little. After a while, the 5 bandits used the secret method of invisibility and quietly attacked Ji Tianqing. Their movements were quite hidden. They scattered and approached from different directions. The tribulation cloud vortex in the sky had been rotating calmly at a uniform speed. There was no strange phenomenon at all. This made them feel relieved. They no longer had any worries. When they were only tens of thousands of feet away from Ji Tianqing, they waved their weapons and used their most powerful killing moves to attack Ji Tianqing. Clear Wind Moon Slashing Blade. 10 Floating Cloud Imperial Swords. Golden Dragon Breaking Dawn. 10,000 swords facing the sky. With a few angry shouts, dazzling saber lights and sword shadows appeared in the sky, blotting out the sky and the sun. In an instant, hundreds of magic lights and shadows drowned Ji Tianqing's figure. And he was still wrapped in the bloody light, floating motionlessly in the sky, unaware of all this. Of course, even if he sensed the danger, it was useless. He was sealed by the dark red bloody light and couldn't move at all. Dozens of miles away, Yun Yao suddenly saw several bandits attacking Ji Tianqing. Her face suddenly changed, and her eyes surged with murderous intent. No! She shouted with grief and indignation. She no longer cared to hide and rushed out with the reverse water divine sword. Although she couldn't save Ji Tianqing in time, she couldn't do anything. She swore to protect Ji Tianqing even if she had to die. In the distance, Madame Jean Ronger and the other 2 suddenly saw a few bandits appear, and their expressions changed drastically. The 3 of them were filled with worry and indignation, and they hated those bandits incomparably. However, they were too far away. Even if they wanted to save Ji Tianqing, it was impossible. On the other hand, Bright Sword Martial Lord and Chen Yu had always been depressed. Suddenly seeing this scene, the 2 of them were surprised, but at the same time, they also felt a sense of schadenfreude. He, as expected, a tall tree attracts the wind. That kid is too heaven-defying. He finally provoked an enemy. What a pity! A peerless genius who can trigger 9 bolts of heavenly lightning is going to fall like this. The 2 of them secretly laughed, thinking that Ji Tianqing was definitely going to die. But at this moment, the tribulation cloud vortex in the sky suddenly changed. The tribulation cloud that was originally rotating at a uniform speed suddenly lit up with a dazzling golden light, condensing into a few bolts of lightning that could split heaven and earth. Boom! Chapter 1778. The resplendent golden heavenly lightning struck down fiercely with the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. The number of heavenly lightning was neither more nor less. There were exactly 5 bolts, and they struck the 5 bandits respectively. This scene caused Yi Ya, who was observing the situation from afar, to change his expression in shock. Granny Jean, Ronger, and the other 2 were filled with joy, revealing expressions of relief. As for Bright Sword Martial Lord and Chen Yu, their faces were filled with astonishment, completely unable to understand. The 5 bandits sensed that something was wrong, and their faces immediately turned ashen. They were terrified and desperate to the extreme. They were all scared out of their wits and immediately wanted to turn around and run away. Unfortunately, the brilliant heavenly might enveloped them, suppressing them like a towering mountain, making it difficult for them to move an inch and unable to dodge at all. Kaboom! Following a few earth-shattering thunderclaps, 5 golden heavenly lightning bolts exploded with a loud bang. The dazzling golden light enveloped the sky for 100 miles. An endless amount of gravel and dust rose up like a mushroom cloud, spreading in all directions. The peerlessly terrifying impact naturally affected Yun Yao. She had just arrived nearby when she was sent flying by the violent shockwave. Fortunately, She had been staying in the water-reverse divine sword, and the heavenly lightning could not do anything to the divine sword. The 5 bandits' fates were extremely miserable. They were blasted into pieces by the heavenly lightning on the spot, and their bodies turned into dust. 2 of them were relatively lucky. Only their bodies were destroyed, and their souls were severely injured, but they tenaciously survived. The other 3 were more unlucky. Not only were their bodies destroyed, but their souls were also destroyed on the spot, and they were completely dead. These 3 bandits had transcended their own heavenly tribulation, but they died under someone else's heavenly tribulation. This kind of death was truly very novel. When the smoke, dust and lightning dissipated, the 2 heavily injured souls fled into the distance in panic. Even if they disobeyed Yi Ya's orders and were sentenced to death by Yi Ya, they couldn't care less. However, things didn't go as they wished. They fled in fear, but they neglected one thing. Ji Tianxing had companions. Whoosh! An icy blue sword light suddenly shot out from the sea of fire and instantly pierced a ball of divine soul. Boom! With a dull explosion, the soul exploded on the spot and was shattered by the water-reverse divine sword. This person had the strength of the 5th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm, but he was seriously injured and his strength was extremely weak. How could this person survive being hit by the water-reverse divine sword when he was caught off guard? When the other soul saw its companion being killed, it was scared out of its wits and desperately accelerated to escape. But it was futile. Since Yun Yao's killing intent had already been aroused, there was no way she would leave anyone alive. Whoosh! She then controlled the reverse water divine sword and instantly traversed 10 miles in the sky, killing her way to the back of the divine soul. The reverse water sword emitted a sky full of cold light. It condensed into a giant sword that was hundreds of meters long. Carrying with it unparalleled prowess, it violently slashed down. Another muffled explosion rang out, and the severely injured divine soul was also shattered by the sword light, disintegrating into wisps of qi that scattered into the sea of fire. 3 bandits were killed by the heavenly tribulation, and 2 by Yun Yao's divine sword. Yi Ya, who was in the distance, rushed over to rescue them after realizing that something was wrong. But he was too far away. Even if he teleported continuously, he couldn't stop Yun Yao. Damn it! That damned woman has been hiding nearby all this time. Yi Ya witnessed the death of his 5 subordinates with his own eyes. The anger in his heart was almost off the charts. He recognized the water-reverse divine sword and knew that it was Yun Yao's magic treasure. He hated Yun Yao to the core. Despicable bitch! In that case, I'll kill you first and then deal with that brat. Yi Ya immediately had this thought when he saw the water-reverse divine sword flying across the sky. Ji Tianxing was in the middle of his tribulation and had no time to care about other things. Although Yun Yao had the divine sword, she was alone after all and only had the strength of the 1st level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. Therefore, Yi Ya decided to kill Yun Yao first. After snatching the divine sword, he would kill Ji Tianxing. With a flash of brilliance in his palm, a black feather fan appeared. With a shake of his black robe, he rushed toward the water-reverse divine sword as fast as a stream of light. He waved the black feather fan and shot out a black light that blotted out the sky. Black wings split the sky. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Thousands of pitch-black and cold light blades flew out of the black feather fan. They combined in pairs and rushed toward the water-reverse divine sword like pairs of black light wings. The black light cut through the sky and suppressed the heavenly fire in the sky. In the blink of an eye, the black light that filled the sky surrounded the water-reverse divine sword and sealed the open space within a radius of 10,000 feet. Hundreds of black light wings spun crazily, desperately trying to kill the water-reverse divine sword. The blade-like black wings wantonly collided and cut the water-reverse divine sword, producing crisp, ding-ding-dang-dang-dang, sounds that lingered in the ears. However, the water-reverse divine sword was a divine weapon. It was indestructible and invincible. Even if it was strangled by hundreds of black wings, the divine sword was unscathed. Even the layer of icy blue light on the surface was not defeated. On the contrary, those black light wings were constantly shattered by the divine sword. However, these black wings were very strange and changeable. Even if they were shattered into pieces, the black wings could quickly split and recombine to form more and sharper light blades. In just 100 breaths of time, the hundreds of black wings were all shattered and turned into tens of thousands of black light blades. So many black light blades formed a light shield that covered an area of 10 miles. It was like a ceiling formation that suppressed the water reverse divine sword. Although the water reverse divine sword was very powerful, Yun Yao's strength was 6 realms lower than Yi Ya's. She controlled the water reverse divine sword and used all her strength to break out of the encirclement, but she still could not escape. After the light shield formed by the black light blades was shattered and pierced, Yi Ya could always repair it immediately. The water reverse divine sword was so indestructible that it made him even more certain that this was a treasure sword above the divine grade. He became more and more excited and swore to snatch the treasure sword. After attacking for a long time without success, he used a divine soul secret technique. He used the black light blades to release divine soul power and crazily attacked Yun Yao. Yun Yao hid in the water reverse divine sword. Her divine soul was also affected and could not use her full strength. Her counterattack became weaker and weaker, and her situation became more and more dangerous. In the distance, Grandma Jean and the other two, Bright Sword Martial Lord, and Chen Yu all saw this scene. Everyone secretly stared at Yi Ya and the water reverse divine sword, not understanding what was going on. Unknowingly, another quarter of an hour passed. Yun Yao's divine soul suffered a heavy blow. Her consciousness became more and more blurry, and her counterattack became weaker and weaker. With just the water reverse divine sword, she was no longer able to resist Yi Ya's various strange methods. Not long after, when her divine soul fell into a coma, she was about to be captured by Yi Ya and be at his mercy. But at this time, the tribulation cloud vortex in the sky gradually began to dissipate. The dark red bloodlight that wrapped around Ji Tianqing also cracked into pieces and quickly dissipated in the sky. Ji Tianqing, who was motionless like a stone statue, finally regained consciousness and slowly opened his eyes. Without a doubt, his heavenly tribulation had ended. The moment he opened his eyes, his entire body burst out with a majestic domineering aura that suppressed the heavens and earth. 2 rays of golden light shot out from his eyes that were as bright as stars. Chapter 1779. When the tribulation clouds dissipated, they turned into a divine golden light that covered the sky and earth, pouring into Ji Tianqing's body. His body swelled violently, and he immediately turned into a 10-foot-tall giant, covered in golden light. His white robe was like snow, his long hair fluttered, his arms hung by his side, and his body burst out with a domineering aura. He walked out of the divine golden light, with the sky above his head and the earth beneath his feet, as if he controlled the heavens and earth. In his deep and cold eyes, purple, blue, and golden lightning flashed, changing between life and death, containing supreme divine power. At this moment, although he was not a god, he surpassed all the gods in the world. His body stood proudly between heaven and earth, looking up at the sky. His face was cold, and his eyes were indifferent as he murmured, "The heavens can't cover my eyes. This earth can't bury my heart. The gods and demons of the heavens will also vanish." As his voice fell, the divine golden light that enveloped his body quickly converged. The golden light was the reward given by the heavenly Tao after he successfully transcended the tribulation. His injuries had been healed, and his strength had reached its peak and limit. His entire person had been reborn and reached a new realm. Dozens of miles away, Yi Ya was controlling tens of thousands of black light blades, crazily attacking the reverse water sword and Yun Yao. Suddenly seeing Ji Tianqing wake up and feeling Ji Tianqing's powerful aura, his face immediately changed, and his eyes revealed a strong sense of fear. Damn it! That kid really succeeded in transcending the heavenly tribulation. His strength. His aura. How can it be so powerful? Yi Ya couldn't believe that Ji Tianqing had just stepped into the first layer of the tribulation realm, and his strength and aura were actually on par with him. This was simply a miracle. In the sky further away, the Honorable Sword Martial Lord and Chen Yu stared at Ji Tianqing, their eyes extremely complicated. Shock, disbelief, and strong jealousy filled the hearts of the two. Granny Jean, Jieyu, and Rong revealed a look of surprise and relief. Especially Granny Jean and Rong they both breathed a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Just as Madame Jean had said, it was their honor and fortune to be able to witness a peerless genius transcend the ninth heaven tribulation with their own eyes. They would never be able to see another monstrous genius like Ji Tianqing in their lifetime. At that moment, Jieyu's eyes suddenly widened, revealing a look of anticipation. Look, that gentleman is making his move. Madame Jean and Rong quickly looked over and saw a scene that they would never forget. Ji Tianqing stepped into the sky, holding the 80-foot-long burial of heaven's sword in his hand. His robe fluttered in the wind as he charged towards Yi. Shwa! With a flash of white light, he teleported 40 miles away and appeared behind Yi. Then, with his left hand behind his back and his right hand holding the sword of burial of heaven, he slashed out fiercely. Boom! Suddenly the pitch-black, ice-cold sword burst forth with 3-colored lightning, condensing into 3 giant swords that slashed towards Yi. The golden, purple, and blue heavenly lightning that had appeared in the heavenly tribulation before actually appeared again and was used in his sword technique. Yi had already sensed that something was wrong, so he retreated in advance and narrowly avoided the lightning attack. However, the cage formed by tens of thousands of black light blades was hit by the 3 giant lightning swords, and a series of muffled loud noises burst out. Bang! 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 In the deafening loud noise, the black light cage was torn apart, bursting into pieces and scattering on the ground. The secret technique that Yi had painstakingly used was destroyed by Ji Tianqing just like that. He stood in the distant sky with a horrified expression and thought to himself with lingering fear. Damn little bastard, you can actually control heavenly lightning? Fortunately, I dodged in time, or else I would be in trouble. Whoosh! At that moment, an icy blue brilliance flew out from the black light fragments and stopped beside Ji Tianqing. With a flash of icy blue light, Yun Yao appeared in front of Ji Tianqing and looked at him with concern. Tianqing, you finally passed the heavenly tribulation successfully. Are you hurt anywhere? Yun Yao looked at Ji Tianqing and asked with concern. Ji Tianqing looked at her gently and shook his head. I'm not hurt, and my strength has returned to its peak. You don't have to worry. Yun Yao was relieved, and all the worry and anxiety in her heart dissipated. She looked at Ji Tianqing with burning eyes and said hesitantly, Tianqing, you have also reached the first tier of the crossing calamity realm. You seem to have been reborn. I feel like you have become a different person, especially your aura. Is it related to the awakening of your soul memory? Yun Yao could certainly guess that Ji Tianqing had become so sacred, dignified, and cold. It must be related to Kenshin. Ji Tianqing did not deny it and nodded. Yes. After getting a positive answer, Yun Yao showed a gratified look and felt much more relaxed. At this moment, Yi took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. He waved his black feather fan and shot out an overwhelming black light. Claw of Annihilation. The endless black light quickly condensed into a giant claw with a radius of 10,000 feet. The giant claw was black and cold, emitting a terrifying aura of death. It descended from the sky and grabbed Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. The giant claw came silently, but its power was enough to destroy the heavens and the earth. Yi thought that Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao would not be able to resist his attack because they were distracted. But he did not expect that Ji Tianqing would stare at him coldly and lock onto his divine soul aura as soon as the Claw of Annihilation appeared. Star-shattering fist. Ji Tianqing suddenly raised his left hand and fiercely blasted out a golden fist aura that was 10,000 feet long towards the Claw of Annihilation. Boom! The fist and the claw were both the size of a mountain and contained terrifying power. The two collided loudly, and a thunderous sound erupted. At the same time, they exploded in the sky and shattered into pieces. Thousands of fragments scattered in the sky. Ji Tianqing took the opportunity to rush towards Yi and used his ultimate technique with the Burial of Heaven. Moon-breaking sword. A colorful sword aura that was 10,000 feet long appeared out of thin air and slashed towards Yi with the power to destroy everything. This sword not only contained 100% of Ji Tianqing's Dharma power, but also the power of 3 types of lightning. It was very powerful. Yi's expression changed on the spot. His eyes were filled with terror. In a moment of desperation, black light surged out of his body and formed layers of black wings to protect himself. Bam! The 10,000 feet long giant sword hit him and there was a loud explosion. His body flashed with light and his black wings were all shattered. He was also sent flying in a sorry state. While he was still in midair, he had already opened his mouth and spat out dark red blood. A long and narrow wound split open on his chest and blood gushed out like a fountain. Yi flew for a full 5 kilometers before crashing into the rubble, splashing rocks and dirt all over the sky. He could not believe that Ji Tianqing had actually broken through his defense and severely injured him with one strike. Fear filled his heart. He quickly crawled out of the rubble and turned to flee without hesitation, flying towards the depths of the flaming mountain. Chapter 1780. Ji Tianqing's killing intent had already risen, so how could he let Yi Ya go? When he successfully passed the tribulation and woke up, he made up his mind to kill Yi Ya to prevent future troubles. Swoosh! A golden light flashed, and he flew across the sky at lightning speed, chasing after Yi Ya. Yun Yao also entered the reverse water divine sword and drove it to chase after him. After a few breaths, both sides disappeared into the depths of the sea of fire. Both Honorable Sword Martial Lord and Chen Yu frowned, their eyes revealing worry. I can't believe it. That kid has just stepped into the Crossing Calamity Realm, and he can defeat that 7th-level Crossing Calamity Realm powerhouse. In my memory, it's already an incredible miracle for a 1st-level Crossing Calamity Realm powerhouse to defeat a 4th-level Crossing Calamity Realm powerhouse. That kid can actually cross 6 levels to defeat a strong enemy. It's simply unprecedented. Both of them were filled with shock and still found it hard to believe. Chen Yu thought for a moment and said worriedly, looking at the direction that the black-clothed man fled, it's obvious that he went deep into the Flaming Mountain. Martial Uncle, we also have to go deep into the Flaming Mountain to look for traces of the glazed fire dragon. Should we chase after him? Honorable Sword Martial Lord nodded and said, of course, I want to see how monstrous that kid is. After saying that, he flew across the sky with Chen Yu and also flew deep into the Flaming Mountain. 100 miles away, Madame Jean, Jieyu, and Ronger were all silent with complicated expressions. Especially Ronger, her originally bright eyes had become somewhat dim, and her excited mood had also calmed down. After all, everyone saw that a woman in a white dress had appeared in the ice-blue sword. The woman in the white dress was as beautiful as a fairy, and her temperament was otherworldly. She was a rare beauty in the world. Most importantly, the relationship between the woman in the white dress and Ji Tianqing was not shallow. They were quite close and looked like a couple. Seeing that Ronger's mood was somewhat low, Jieyu comforted her. Ronger, you don't have to be disappointed. We haven't come into contact with that young master yet. Who knows if the woman in the white dress is his partner or his friend? Ronger shook her head gently and said, Master's wife, don't worry. Ronger is fine. Even if she had some regret and disappointment in her heart, how could she show it? Wouldn't that be a joke? Jieyu understood her temperament and continued to persuade her. Although the woman in white is a rare beauty in the world, our Ronger is not bad either. Most importantly, Ronger, your status is noble, and your strength is not ordinary. In short, you still have a chance. Ronger became more and more embarrassed. She quickly turned around and lowered her head. Mistress, please don't say any more. Ronger doesn't have such thoughts. Jieyu wanted to persuade her again, but Madame Jean waved her hand to stop her. They've already left. If you continue to dawdle, we won't be able to catch up. Ronger said in a low voice. Granny, there's no need to chase after him. It's already our honor to be able to witness a peerless genius survive 9 bolts of lightning. As for the rest, Ronger doesn't have any extravagant hopes. Madame Jean glanced at her and said with a kind smile. Silly child, what are you thinking? They're heading towards the depths of the blazing mountain, and we're heading there too. No matter if we meet that young master or not, we still have to carry out the plan and search for the glazed fire dragon. Only then did Ronger understand that she had misunderstood. She suddenly became even more embarrassed. Madame Jean no longer said anything. She took the two of them across the sky and flew towards the north. Yi Ya's body was wrapped in a layer of cold black light. He turned into a 3-foot-long black bird and was galloping in the sea of fire. Although he was injured by Ji Tianqing, the injury was not serious. In the process of escaping, he had already taken a healing pill, temporarily suppressing his injuries. However, he had just fought a big battle and flew continuously in the sea of fire for 4 hours. He had consumed a lot of his spiritual power. He already felt that his strength was falling short of his desire, and his flying speed was gradually slowing down. Looking back in the sea of fire 10 miles away, there were 2 rays of light, one gold and one blue, chasing after him. Yi Ya tilted his head and cursed fiercely. This pair of bitches has been chasing me for 4 hours, and they still don't want to give up. Humph. I'll let you be arrogant for a while. When I meet up with the first master, I'll come and take your lives. Yi Ya calculated in his heart. In another hour or so, he would be able to reach the vicinity of the glazed fire dragon's lair and meet up with the first master. At that time, He would definitely kill Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao ruthlessly to wash away the previous shame. However, Yi Ya was scheming in his heart, but he did not know that Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao also had a purpose. The two of them had been following behind Yi Ya, maintaining a distance of 10 miles. They could not only put a lot of pressure on Yi Ya, but also not let him escape. Yun Yao was a little puzzled, so she secretly asked Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, if you want to catch up with Yi Ya, you only need to fly on your sword. You will be able to stop him soon. We have already chased him for tens of thousands of miles. Why haven't you made a move yet?" Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a playful smile, and he explained unhurriedly, "What is our purpose in coming to the Flaming Mountain this time?" Yun Yao replied without hesitation, "We are looking for the materials to repair the divine sword, as well as the legendary glazed fire dragon." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, "That's right. The materials to repair the divine sword have been gathered, and my heavenly tribulation has passed. Now, we only have to find the glazed fire dragon." We rushed into the Flaming Mountain rashly without any informants or sources of information. It will be very difficult to find traces of the glazed fire dragon. But Yi Ya is the leader of the Black Feather Gang, and he has information and intelligence about the glazed fire dragon. When he robbed us before, a bandit said that they were rushing to support the First Master. So I'm sure that the First Master of the Black Feather Gang is most likely in the depths of the Flaming Mountain, and he has most likely found the glazed fire dragon. Hearing what he said, Yun Yao's eyes suddenly lit up, and she said with some surprise, "Tianqing, you are really meticulous. You actually remembered this detail. No wonder Yi Ya didn't escape from the Flaming Mountain after being injured by you, but instead fled into the depths of the Flaming Mountain. From this, it seems that he wants to meet up with the First Master of the Black Feather Gang, and then kill us for revenge." "That's right." Ji Tianqing nodded and said in a playful tone, "We need Yi Ya to lead the way and help us find the glazed fire dragon, so we can't kill him now. But when he is about to meet up with the First Master of the Black Feather Gang, his death will come." Only then did Yun Yao understand his plan, and she couldn't help but nod in agreement. After a pause, she asked again, "By the way, Tianqing, the 4 materials to repair the divine sword have been gathered. When do you plan to repair the divine sword?" Ji Tianqing said calmly, "The 4 materials can not only repair the Burial of Heaven sword, but also restore the divine sword to the holy level. But I have asked the Burial of Heaven, and it must be repaired by a martial sage expert and a holy level cauldron." Chapter 1781. Unknowingly, another hour had passed. Yi Ya flew desperately for more than 10,000 miles before he finally saw the light of hope. Under his feet was an undulating mountain range, and around him was a boundless sea of fire. However, in the distance, in the sky that was illuminated by the flames, there were flashes of Dharma spell brilliance that streaked across the sky like lightning. There was also a fiery red figure that was as tall as a mountain circling in the sky, constantly shattering the Dharma spell brilliance that filled the sky. That fiery red figure was very majestic and mighty. It was the legendary glazed fire dragon. It was obvious that the glazed fire dragon was fighting with many experts. The two sides were fighting an earth-shattering battle that could be seen tens of thousands of miles away. Accompanied by countless dazzling lights, there were also loud and furious dragon roars that came from the sky. Seeing such a scene, Yi Ya was shocked, and his eyes were filled with anticipation. "That's great! The First Master and my brothers must be waiting for me there. At most, I'll be able to meet up with them in another hour." Yi Ya muttered to himself excitedly. His fatigue dissipated, and he became energetic. However, at this moment, he suddenly sensed an extremely dangerous aura behind him. He sensed that something was wrong and turned his head to look back. He was instantly dumbfounded. Unbeknownst to him, Ji Tianqing and the reverse water godly sword had actually flown 3,000 meters behind him and brazenly launched an attack. A blazing white sword light that was hundreds of feet long and that huge ice-blue divine sword was slashing down at him like an aurora. Whoosh! Whoosh! The sword light and the divine sword attacked from both sides, locking onto Yi Ya's divine soul aura, making it impossible for him to escape. His eyes widened in shock, anger, and disbelief. No. How is this possible? How did they suddenly catch up? Yi Ya had been chased for more than 4 hours, and the other party had not been able to catch up to him. This made him mistakenly think that the other party only had this much strength and means. But now, the sudden attack had shattered his hopes and plans, and caused him to be filled with terror. Space Underworld Escape. At this critical moment, Yi did not hesitate to use his full strength and used his ultimate escape technique. He flapped his pitch-black wings and used a great ability to break through the sky, instantly teleporting 20 miles away. Shwa! With a flash of light, he appeared in the sky 20 miles away. The blazing white sword light missed its target and slashed into a mountain, causing a loud rumbling sound to ring out. The light golden mountain peak was slashed open by the sword ray, and a huge ravine was formed, causing the sky to be filled with shattered rocks. However, the 300-meter-long water reversal divine sword seemed to have eyes. It also tore through the air and teleported 20 miles, catching up with Yi Ya. Boom! With a muffled sound, the reverse water sword struck Yi Ya, causing him to fall from the sky and crash into the mountain range below. The black light shield protecting him was shattered by the divine sword. His back had also been slashed open by the divine sword. It was at least 2 feet long and was so deep that his bones could be seen. Fresh blood was gushing out. The unimaginable force caused him to crash heavily into a mountain peak that was thousands of meters tall. He had smashed a huge hole in the faint golden rock ground. The surrounding cracks were densely packed, and countless rocks and soil were splashed out. The entire mountain began to shake, as if it was unable to bear the weight and was about to collapse. However, the pain his body was enduring was nothing compared to the shock in his heart. Shwa! He quickly got up, crawled out of the deep hole, and flew back into the sky. Before he could escape, Ji Tianqing had already caught up and blocked his path. The reverse water sword also floated behind him, blocking his escape route. He was surrounded and had no way to advance or retreat. However, he was a famous martial monarch. Even if he was in danger, he could still maintain his calm. He returned to his original form and returned to the appearance of the black-robed man. He stared coldly at Ji Tianqing and asked in a deep voice, "Boy, you were hiding your strength before? You deliberately chased me here?" At this point, if he still didn't understand what was going on, then he wouldn't be the second in command of the Black Feather Gang. Ji Tianqing looked at him expressionlessly and said indifferently, "Not bad, you're not too stupid." Yi sneered with a sinister face and cursed with resentment. "Little bastard, you actually dared to use me to find the traces of the glazed fire dragon. You're really audacious and reckless." Ji Tianqing still said indifferently, "I've already done so and succeeded. You've lost your value and can die." "Haha." Yi sneered again. "Boy, you're despicable enough, but you forgot that I've already passed the 7th heavenly tribulation. How could I be so easy to deal with? Moreover, I'm the second in command of the Black Feather Gang. If you want to kill me, you'd better think about whether you're qualified to bear the revenge of the Black Feather Gang." Ji Tianqing still looked indifferent and said indifferently, "So what if you've passed the 7th heavenly tribulation? To me, no one below the martial saint realm is a match for me. Killing you is as easy as flipping my hand. As for the Black Feather Gang, a gang that I've never heard of, what can they do to me?" His relaxed and indifferent tone and calm demeanor all revealed his absolute confidence and domineering attitude. Yi Ya was also intimidated by Ji Tianqing's domineering aura. He immediately revealed a stunned expression and was somewhat stunned. However, he could see that Ji Tianqing was not lying and was definitely not bluffing. His intimidation had failed and he became angry from embarrassment. His face became ferocious. He pointed to the sky in front of him and shouted angrily, "Boy, the leader of the Black Feather Gang is just in front of you, just 10,000 miles away. If you know what's good for you, retreat now and I can pretend that nothing happened. Otherwise, before you can defeat this sovereign, First Master will rush over and tear you to shreds." Yi Ya's strength and identity could no longer suppress Ji Tianqing. He could only use the leader as his backer and hope that Ji Tianqing would have some scruples. Ji Tianqing frowned slightly and asked in a low voice, "The leader of the Black Feather Gang? Has he reached the martial saint realm?" "Huh. I haven't." Yi Ya was stunned for a moment but still chose to tell the truth. After all, even if he made up nonsense, he could not hide it from Ji Tianqing. "Of course," he added confidently, "the leader's strength far surpasses mine and he has already passed the 8th stage of the heavenly tribulation." Before he could finish his sentence, Ji Tianqing interrupted him and said expressionlessly, "Since he has not reached the martial sage realm, let him come and save you. You can kill him as well." Ji Tianqing said it very casually, as if he was talking about something like eating and drinking, careless. Yi was dumbfounded on the spot and stared at Ji Tianqing with his eyes bulging. The strong sense of anger and humiliation almost made him go berserk. However, he had no way to refute her, and his face turned purple with anger. He really could not understand. Ji Tianqing had just passed the first heavenly tribulation and reached the first stage of the tribulation passing realm. Where did he get such strong confidence? He only had the strength of the first stage of the tribulation passing realm, and he did not put an 8 tribulation martial lord in his eyes. Chapter 1782. Of course, Ji Tianqing was just joking. He would not ask for trouble and give Yi a chance to ask for help. If Yi sent a message to the Black Feather Gang's leader for help, it would not only bring trouble but also delay time. Ji Tianqing decided to end the battle quickly. Taking advantage of Yi's rage and distraction, he decisively made his move. Sword thrust. The burial of heaven stabbed forward, and a cold light bloomed, quickly disappearing into the sea of fire. The next moment, Yi sensed that something was wrong and was about to teleport away. That dot of cold light had already pierced his chest, piercing through his soft armor and flesh. A dazzling cold light exploded in his chest, like fireworks. Bam! A loud explosion shook the sky as the cold light rose into the sky like a mushroom cloud. The dazzling white light drowned Yi's body. The terrifying explosive force tore his chest apart. His flesh and internal organs were blasted into pieces. He tumbled and flew out for more than 10 miles before falling from the sky. When he smashed into a mountain peak, his upper body was a bloody mess, leaving only a skeleton. Pieces of flesh and organs hung from the broken and incomplete skeleton. There were not many pieces of flesh left on his shoulders, revealing his blackened bones. Even half of his head had been blown up, and it was a bloody mess. If it were anyone else, their body would have died after suffering such heavy injuries. However, Yi was different. He was a 7th-level Tribulation Transcendence Realm expert after all, and his vitality was extremely tenacious. His body was not dead yet, only heavily injured. He got up from the ground, quietly took out a chopstick-sized arrow token, and activated the array formation within. Whoosh! The arrow token turned into a wisp of black light, quickly flew into the sky, and disappeared. After sending out the arrow token, he hurriedly used a secret technique to release a surging black light that enveloped his body. The black light enveloped his wounds, and his flesh and blood were reconstructing at a speed visible to the naked eye. He would be able to recover from his injuries in 10 breaths at most. Of course, that could only temporarily repair the missing flesh and blood and maintain the vitality of his body. If he wanted to truly recover from his injuries, he would have to go into seclusion for 2 to 3 years. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing would not give him the chance to heal. 10 breaths of time was enough for Ji Tianqing to kill him several times over. Shwa! With a flash of golden light, Ji Tianqing teleported another 20 miles and arrived in front of Yi Ya. Thunder! Ji Tianqing let out a low growl and opened the third eye on his forehead. His mysterious and deep eyes released an endless amount of lightning. Golden, purple, and blue lightning condensed into a 300-meter-long pillar of lightning that struck Yi Ya. Boom! At that instant, thunder rumbled while an enormous bang shook the heavens, and it wasn't inferior to Ji Tianqing's tribulation in the slightest. The 3 different colored lightning pillars contained the power of 3 different attributes, and their might was extremely violent. Yi Ya's heavily injured body was shattered by the lightning on the spot, turning into countless charred pieces that scattered in all directions. This time, his body was completely destroyed. The 1,000-feet-tall Golden Mountain was also shattered by the thunderbolts, collapsing into a pile of ruins with a deafening rumble. A black bird that looked like a crow flew out of the smoke and lightning in the sky. It wasn't a physical object, but Yi Ya's divine soul. After it escaped from the area covered by the lightning, it fled towards the north in horror, bursting out with its fastest speed. However, Yun Yao was already ready. Shwa! The 300-meter-long water-reversing divine sword slashed down from the side with an overwhelming icy blue light, drowning Yi Ya's divine soul. Bang! At that moment, Yun Yao used a spell to maximize the power of the water-reversing divine sword. Yi Ya's divine soul was directly shattered by the divine sword, turning into thousands of wisps of black chi that scattered in the sea of fire. He couldn't resist the water-reversing divine sword at all. When the icy blue brilliance dissipated, the black chi that scattered between heaven and earth was also burned into nothingness by the azure glass heavenly fire. the second in command of the Black Feather Gang, a martial lord at the 7th level of the Tribulation Transcendence Realm, died in the depths of the Flaming Mountain. The huge water-reversing divine sword quickly shrank to 3 feet long. With a flash of light, Yun Yao flew out of the divine sword and appeared in the sky. Holding the water-reversing divine sword in her hand, she walked to Ji Tianqing and stood still. Phew! I've finally dealt with these despicable bandits. I don't have to be entangled by them anymore. Yun Yao put away the water-reversing divine sword and heaved a sigh of relief. Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, Yi Ya and those ordinary bandits are nothing to worry about. The key is the leader of the Black Feather Gang. I'm afraid it's not easy to deal with. Before Yi Ya was killed, he released a black light. It seemed to be a message arrow. In my opinion, he must have sent it to the leader of the Black Feather Gang. We have to be careful. The people of the Black Feather Gang will definitely take revenge on us. Yun Yao stared at him and said with a teasing smile, Didn't you just say that you are invincible below the martial sage realm? The leader of the Black Feather Gang is not a martial sage. Even if he comes, he will definitely die. Ji Tianqing said calmly, I was just saying. You believe my words to scare Yi Ya? Humph. Yun Yao rolled her eyes at him. At this moment, Ji Tianqing turned to look at the sky behind him and said in a deep voice, The two of you don't have to hide. Come out. However, the sky within 100 miles was quiet. Other than the surging sea of fire, there was no other figure. Ji Tianqing waited for a moment and continued, The two of you, it's not like we haven't met before. Why are you hiding? Obviously, he had discovered the other party. Not only were there two people, but they had met before. As his voice fell, two figures appeared in the sky 30 miles away. One was an old man in a purple robe, and the other was a young man in a black suit, carrying a broadsword on his back. These two people were Martial Lord Brightsword and Chen Yu. The two of them had secretly followed Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Just now, they had hidden nearby and witnessed the process of Yi Ya being killed with their own eyes. The two of them were filled with shock and were very afraid of Ji Tianqing. At this moment, their whereabouts had been seen through by Ji Tianqing. The two of them were forced to appear, and they were both somewhat embarrassed and distressed. Chen Yu lowered his head slightly and put on an expressionless appearance. He did not dare to look directly into Ji Tianqing's eyes. Martial Lord Brightsword stroked his beard and looked at Ji Tianqing expressionlessly. He pretended to be calm and said, Little friend, I was passing by this place. I didn't expect to meet you again. It's really fate. Ji Tianqing sneered in his heart, but his expression did not change. He said indifferently, This is the hinterland of the Flaming Mountain. There are countless experts and glazed fire dragons roaming about. It's very dangerous. You two old, weak, and disabled people are actually wandering around here. Aren't you afraid of losing your lives? This is not a place you should come to. Quickly leave. His expression and tone were filled with disdain, as if he was a strong person looking down on the weak. Martial Lord Brightsword and Chen Yu's expressions changed drastically. They were humiliated to the point that their faces turned ashen. The blood in their bodies flowed in reverse, and they almost spat out a mouthful of blood. It was because what Ji Tianqing said was exactly what Martial Lord Brightsword had said back then. Chapter 1783. The thick anger and humiliation caused Brightsword Martial Lord and Chen Yu to tremble in anger. Chen Yu was still fine, but Brightsword Martial Lord was a famous expert who had been living like a prince for many years. In the empire he belonged to, no matter where he went, he was treated as an honored guest by many forces and was respected and flattered by countless martial artists. He relied on his noble status and martial arts experience, and always considered himself a martial arts senior. It was because of this that when he saw Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao barge into the blazing mountain, he gave them a few pointers. But he never would have thought that Ji Tianqing would return the words he said to him without missing a word. Moreover, Ji Tianqing's tone and attitude were even more arrogant. How could Brightsword Martial Lord accept this? But what could he do if he didn't endure it? Even Yi Ya had been killed by Ji Tianqing. How could he dare to shed all pretense of cordiality with Ji Tianqing? He took a few deep breaths and barely suppressed his anger. He stared at Ji Tianqing with a gloomy gaze and said in a deep voice, Young man, don't be so arrogant when you're young. You still have a long way to go. When you're outside, it's best to restrain yourself. If you can't even distinguish between superior and inferior, you'll definitely suffer a great loss in the future. Ji Tianqing immediately revealed a sneer and said with a mocking tone, "Superior and inferior? Who do you think is superior and inferior? Who is superior and who is inferior? There's no need to wait for the future. I want to see right now, what kind of loss can you make me suffer?" He stared coldly at Bright Sword Martial Lord. His gaze and tone were extremely sharp, as if he was going to confront him head-on. Bright Sword Martial Lord's face immediately turned ashen. His lungs were about to explode from anger, but he was still unable to flare up. When Chen Yu saw that his martial uncle was humiliated, his blood surged and he shouted angrily, "Brat! You're too arrogant. My martial uncle is a highly respected martial arts senior, an expert who has been famous for many years. Previously, outside the Blazing Mountain, he only reminded you out of kindness. I didn't expect that you would be so narrow-minded and seek revenge for the smallest grievance. You really don't know what's good for you." Ji Tianqing looked at Chen Yu indifferently and sneered, "Hee, you only reminded us out of kindness? I don't think so. We don't even know you. Do we need you to remind us? All of you are meddling in other people's business." At the same time, he took advantage of his seniority and put on a high and mighty attitude. "You think you are kind, but in fact, you think you are better than others. Now, I'm reminding you out of goodwill to leave this place as soon as possible. Why don't you accept my kind reminder?" Moreover, he looks so angry that he's about to go crazy. Speaking to there, he looked at the Honorable Sword Martial Lord with disdain, sneered, and said, "You opened your mouth to berate others, which is a kind reminder. I'm also reminding you, so how is that not knowing what's good for me? No matter what you say, you are always in the right? You're already so old. Don't you have any shame?" Ji Tianqing's series of words had exposed Bright Sword Martial Lord and Chen Yu's background, causing the two of them to feel extremely ashamed and indignant. Chen Yu was so angry that his face turned black. His eyes were dyed with a layer of blood red. He was already on the verge of going berserk. Bright Sword Martial Lord was also so angry that his hands were trembling. He was so humiliated that he almost vomited blood. Seeing this, Chen Yu reached out to grab the sword hilt behind his back, as if he was about to draw his sword. Bright Sword Martial Lord hurriedly raised his hand to stop him. He said with a sound transmission, "Chen Yu, don't be impulsive. Bear with it for a while and calm down. Don't forget our goal. It's not a wise move to make a move against this brat now." Chen Yu could only suppress his anger and slowly retract his right hand. He stared coldly at Ji Tianqing and said in a deep voice, "Brat, I'll let you be arrogant for a while. My martial uncle is magnanimous and won't lower himself to your level. But don't forget, there is always someone better than you. There will always be someone who can teach you a lesson." Ji Tianqing's smile became even more playful. He said with a mocking tone, "You guys want to lower yourself to my level, but do you have the ability?" Such a straightforward provocation and humiliation caused Bright Sword Martial Lord's face to turn black. Under his anger, he actually spat out a mouthful of blood. Chen Yu also went completely berserk. With a clang, he pulled out the broadsword on his back. With a roar, he charged towards Ji Tianqing. "You bastard! I'll fight it out with you." Chen Yu held the sword with both hands. His entire body ignited with scarlet flames. He used all his strength to slash out 100-meter-long flame sword. He was a 4th-level Tribulation Realm expert. Under his rage, he launched an attack. The power of this sword was unstoppable. However, Ji Tianqing didn't take it seriously at all. With an indifferent expression, he waved his sleeves and struck out a resplendent golden light with his right hand. A huge golden palm shadow slashed towards the sword light. Boom! With a crisp explosion, the flame sword was shattered by the palm shadow on the spot. The power of the golden palm didn't dissipate. It struck Chen Yu again, sending him flying 10 miles away. Chen Yu drew an arc in the sky and smashed into a mountain peak, causing rubble to fly all over the sky. When he got up, his mouth and nose were already bleeding and his eyes were seeing stars. "Ah! I'm going to kill you!" Chen Yu was completely enraged. Like a lion that had lost its mind, he let out a furious roar and once again charged towards Ji Tianqing. However, just as he was halfway there, he was stopped by Bright Sword Martial Lord. "Chen Yu, stop!" Bright Sword Martial Lord waved his sleeve and shot out an icy blue brilliance that wrapped around Chen Yu. Chen Yu was unable to break free. His anger and manic emotions were quickly suppressed and he gradually regained his calm. Bright Sword Martial Lord brought him into the sky and flew towards the depths of the flaming mountain. Before leaving, he turned his head to look at Ji Tianqing and left a sentence with a gloomy expression. Brat, it's easy to break if you're too hard. Sooner or later, you'll die prematurely. Bright Sword Martial Lord was cursing Ji Tianqing. His thoughts were extremely vicious. Ji Tianqing also returned the favor and shouted disdainfully, I'll spare your lives today, just to teach you a lesson. Old man, remember, don't meddle in other people's business in the future. Don't rely on your seniority to judge the world. Otherwise, sooner or later, you'll attract a calamity. Bright Sword Martial Lord coldly snorted and no longer argued with him. He quickly left with Chen Yu. When the two of them were far away, Ji Tianqing's expression finally returned to normal. He rushed forward with Yun Yao. Yun Yao looked at him with a strange expression and secretly asked, Tianqing, in the past, you were indifferent and wouldn't punish those two fellows like this. Now, not only has your temperament changed, your temperament has also changed to do as you please. Could it be that Kenshin had such a personality back then? That's not it. Ji Tianqing chuckled and said, Kenshin's temperament was too cold and indifferent. He was more like a god in the sky and not like a mortal. Because of this, even though he ascended to the upper realm and became the king of gods, he let down too many people and left behind many regrets. Chapter 1784. Yun Yao's intuition was right. Ji Tianqing had indeed changed. Ever since he had transcended the tribulation and awakened a portion of Kenshin's memories, his temperament had changed. He was dignified without being angry, as if he was a god that had descended from the 9 heavens, majestic and noble. At the same time, his temperament had also changed. In the past, he was modest and polite, had a mild temperament, and was kind. He would not easily offend others. But now, he was like an unsheathed divine sword, sharp and unstoppable. Yun Yao thought to herself, the Kenshin of the past was too cold, like a god that did not eat the food of mortals. He lacked a bit of humanity. The Tianqing of the past was too modest and kind, and his temperament was indifferent. He was often taken advantage of. Perhaps the current him is the most suitable and the most genuine? Thinking of this, a touch of gratification and anticipation flashed in her eyes. She knew that Ji Tianqing had now completed his transformation and had truly grown into a martial arts powerhouse. The battlefield where the glazed fire dragon and the many powerhouses were fighting was tens of thousands of miles away from Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. The two of them continued to fly north for 4 hours before arriving near the battlefield. However, when the two of them arrived, the battle had already ended. The spell light that blotted out the sky had already dissipated, and the fire dragon that was hundreds of miles long had also disappeared. When the two of them arrived at the battlefield, they only saw that the mountain range within a 1,000-mile radius was in a complete mess. In the golden glazed fire dragon, there were broken rocks and collapsed mountain ranges everywhere. The ground was covered with ravines, densely packed like a spider web. There were also countless deep pits, like abysses. There were still remnants of chaotic dermic power fluctuations in the air, as well as the aura of powerhouses from various races. In the ruins within a 1,000-mile radius, there were still some scattered fragments of Dharma treasures and some minced flesh and bones. Under the burning of the glazed fire dragon, those Dharma treasures, weapons, and pieces of corpses would soon be burned to ashes. Ji Tianqing could imagine that the destruction caused by the battle between those powerhouses and the glazed fire dragon was extremely shocking. However, he and Yun Yao searched the entire battlefield and only saw a few adventurers. Those adventurers were all in the tribulation realm. 2 of them were seriously injured and left the battlefield with gloomy expressions. They had no choice but to leave the mountain of flames. The other few people, like the 2 of them, had just rushed over. Other than that, the experts who had fought with the glazed fire dragon were nowhere to be found. Yun Yao was a little puzzled. She transmitted her voice and asked, Tianqing, where did those experts go? Could it be that the glazed fire dragon has escaped and they are still chasing after it? Ji Tianqing nodded and said, that should be the case. I used a secret technique to investigate the area. There are definitely remnants of those experts' auras in the vicinity. After saying that, He formed a seal with both hands and activated a secret technique. When he formed a mysterious seal with his fingers, his palms immediately shone with a golden light. Open heaven, divine eyes. With a low shout, he pressed his index and middle fingers together and pressed them against the third eye on his forehead. Suddenly, the third eye opened, and a mysterious golden light shone from the pupil. In the open heaven, divine eyes, the scene he saw changed. In the turbulent golden sea of flames, there were thousands of colorful threads floating. They were gradually fading and becoming thinner and thinner. Those colorful threads were the remnants of the auras of the Tribulation Realm experts. He could clearly see that most of the colorful threads in the sky were pointing north. Therefore, he continued to fly north with Yun Yao. Follow me. We will find them soon. Yun Yao did not doubt his words at all. She hurriedly followed him and flew north. The two of them shuttled through the sea of flames as fast as lightning. Along the way, Ji Tianqing used the open heaven divine eyes to see that there were countless colorful threads left in the sky. Yun Yao also used her divine sense to observe that there were many traces of fighting on the ground and in the mountains below. About an hour later, the two of them flew more than 10,000 miles. Ji Tianqing's open heaven divine eyes had already lost its power and naturally dissipated. He and Yun Yao could see that there was a huge flame vortex in the mountains in front of them. The vortex with a radius of 100 miles was formed by golden heavenly flames and was tens of thousands of feet high. The vortex was located in a wide valley surrounded by majestic mountain ranges. Around the flame vortex, there were dozens of auras of the Tribulation Realm experts. Some were fierce and domineering, while others were gloomy and low-key. In addition, there were occasionally figures of martial artists flashing in the sky. It's here. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, and a hint of hope flashed in his eyes. Yun Yao looked at the flame vortex and said with a serious expression, Tianqing, there are at least 30 Tribulation Realm experts hiding around the flame vortex. It seems that there is something strange about the flame vortex. It is very likely to be the hiding place of the glazed fire dragon. Yes. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, let's also go and take a look. We will act according to the situation. After a while, the two of them arrived near the flame vortex. Both of them used the invisibility secret technique and hid on top of a mountain, observing from above. They saw that the valley at the foot of the mountain was an abyss with a radius of 100 miles. The glazed fire dragon was constantly gushing out from the abyss, releasing a violent impact that condensed into a huge vortex. The dazzling flame vortex covered the entire abyss, making it impossible for people to see the situation inside. Ji Tianqing released his soul consciousness to explore. After exploring for 30 miles, his soul consciousness was blocked by an invisible force and could not reach the bottom of the abyss. Obviously, the mysterious abyss of heavenly flames was much deeper than 30 miles. Moreover, the abyss contained an extremely terrifying power. Ji Tianqing looked around the abyss again. The surrounding mountains were straight and steep, forming a circle of cliffs. After a quarter of an hour, he finished his observation and had a general understanding of the abyss of heavenly flames. Yun Yao secretly sent him a voice transmission. Tianqing, I see that those Tribulation Realm experts are lurking around the abyss. They seem to be afraid of the abyss and don't dare to enter it. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and explained, those powerful experts had fought the flame-glazed dragon earlier, and all of them suffered some minor or serious injuries. They followed the glazed fire dragon here. When they saw the glazed fire dragon enter the abyss, they didn't dare to chase after it. They had to stay near the abyss to heal their wounds. Yun Yao was a little surprised. How do you know it so clearly? As if you saw it with your own eyes? It's just my speculation. Ji Tianqing revealed a faint smile and explained, I've already detected the remnant aura of the divine dragon in the abyss. Basically, I'm sure that the glazed fire dragon escaped into this abyss. Yun Yao thought for a while and asked, those experts are injured and don't dare to enter the abyss rashly. We have the reverse water divine sword, which can restrain the glazed fire dragon. How about we take the initiative and enter the abyss to explore? Ji Tianqing chuckled and waved his hand. Don't worry. We're new here. If we rush in rashly, we won't be able to achieve anything. Chapter 1785. Yun Yao had always believed in Ji Tianqing's words. She suppressed the anticipation in her heart, quietly observed, and waited patiently. Like Ji Tianxing, she remained invisible and hid in the 1,000-feet-high peak. Unknowingly, 6 hours had passed. The abyss of heavenly fire had been very calm. There were no strange phenomena or sounds. However, there were constantly powerhouses rushing to the abyss and hiding in the mountains to observe the situation. Ji Tianxing was very patient. While waiting, he chatted with Yun Yao. Yao Yao, it is said that the glazed fire dragon's strength has not reached the martial sage realm. After I catch it, I will give it to you as a mount. How about it? Yun Yao shook her head gently and said, that is a divine dragon above the 8th level of the tribulation stage. How can it be easily caught by you? However, if you can get the glazed fire dragon, it will be a great surprise. Ji Tianxing chuckled and said, I have a black dragon. If you get a glazed fire dragon, we can travel the world in the future. Yun Yao was a little tempted and nodded with a smile. The two chatted for a while, then fell silent and continued to wait. Soon, half a day passed. The abyss of heavenly fire was still calm and there was nothing unusual. However, some people lost their patience and were ready to make a move. There was a group of powerhouses who had not fought with the glazed fire dragon before and rushed here. They secretly observed for a long time and finally decided to take action after considering for a long time. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 3 powerhouses flew over the sea of fire and entered the abyss of heavenly fire. The strength of these 3 people had reached the 4th level of the tribulation stage. They were experienced adventurers. Although they took the lead and seemed a little impatient and reckless. However, they had carefully considered their actions and were very cautious. After entering the abyss, they flew down unhurriedly. They held their magic treasures and weapons and were on guard against their surroundings at all times. After a while, the 3 of them disappeared into the sea of fire. The powerhouses lurking around the abyss released their invisible divine senses and secretly observed the movements of the 3 people. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were no exception. They used their divine senses to stare at the 3 people. Soon, 15 minutes passed. The 3 powerhouses flew down for about 30 miles and remained safe and sound. However, there was an invisible barrier that could block the probing of divine sense. It took a lot of effort for the 3 powerhouses to pass through the invisible barrier and continue to fly down. They had left the detection range of everyone's divine sense, which was equivalent to disappearing. Many experts couldn't find any traces of the 3 people, and they all started to have doubts in their hearts. Not long after, an earth-shattering dragon roar came from the abyss. Roar! Following the loud sound, the entire abyss began to tremble. Immediately after, a torrential scarlet fire emerged from the abyss, as well as a 5-colored brilliance of magic power. Boom! Endless heavenly fire and mana light converged into a huge light pillar that shot up into the sky from the abyss. The experts around the abyss were shocked and realized that the situation was not good. As expected, the rumbling sounds of fighting immediately came from the abyss. Along with the sound of spells exploding, there were also a few screams and cries of pain. A few breaths later, a pale blue light burst out from the abyss. Swoosh! In the pale blue brilliance was a man in armor. It was one of the 3 adventurers from before. He had already lost an arm and a leg, and his body was dripping with blood. His injuries were very serious. He was so scared that his soul almost left his body. He desperately tried to escape. However, just as he was about to escape halfway and was about 20 miles away from leaving the abyss, he was caught by a dark golden dragon claw. That huge dragon claw was as big as a palace. It was dark golden all over, like glass. The dragon claw was very thick and powerful. The sharp nails seemed to be indestructible. The surface was covered with golden dragon scales, and its defensive power was very strong. After the armored man was caught by the dragon claw, his screams came to an abrupt end, and he immediately stopped moving. Following a burst of cracking sounds, he was crushed into pieces by the dragon claw, turning into a pile of flesh and blood that scattered in the abyss. Even his soul was crushed by the dragon claw, turning into hundreds of pieces and burned into nothingness by the heavenly fire. The huge dragon claw retracted. Peace was restored in the heavenly fire abyss, as if nothing had happened. The powerhouses around the abyss saw this scene with their own eyes, and they were all full of horror. Especially those powerhouses who had just arrived and had not fought with the glazed fiery dragon. Seeing the terrifying means of the glazed fiery dragon, their mouths and tongues were dry, and their hearts were pounding. The death of the three adventurers extinguished the restless hearts of the crowd, and everyone calmed down. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao looked at each other with dignified eyes. Yun Yao frowned and analyzed. The strength of the three adventurers is not bad, but they didn't even last for 10 breaths. The glazed fiery dragon is too strong. Tianqing, I think this abyss is strange. It is very likely to be the lair of the glazed fiery dragon. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, I observed the dragon claw just now, and I can roughly judge the strength of the glazed fiery dragon. It is between the 8th level of the crossing tribulation realm and the martial sage realm. This abyss should be its lair. There are other mysteries in it, so we can't rush in rashly. Yun Yao agreed and continued to analyze. The glazed fiery dragon is so powerful, but it hides in the abyss and refuses to come out. I guess it is also injured, or its strength has faded. It's very possible. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, let's continue to wait and let those people explore first to consume the power of the glazed fiery dragon. If we want to get the glazed fiery dragon, we can't be in a hurry. The one who can persist to the end has the greatest chance of success. After making up their minds, the two continued to hide in the mountain and secretly observe the situation. Peace was restored around the abyss. Unknowingly, a whole day passed. The death of the three adventurers deterred many powerhouses, and no one dared to act rashly. However, on the second day, some people couldn't hold back anymore. 4 oddly dressed powerhouses broke into the abyss together. Their figures and facial features were very similar to those of the human race, but there were obvious differences. Obviously, these 4 were powerhouses of the alien race. They had mastered special spells and magical powers, so they dared to be so confident. Moreover, their strength was slightly stronger. 3 of them had reached the 5th level of the crossing tribulation realm. The leader's strength had reached the 6th level of the crossing tribulation realm. The 4 of them spread out and formed some kind of formation. Holding a special magic treasure, they flew into the abyss. The powerhouses around the abyss released their divine senses one after another, paying attention to their movements and situation. After a while, the 4 powerhouses of the alien race dived 30 miles, passed through the invisible barrier, and entered the depths of the abyss. Everyone stared at the abyss, secretly wondering how long the 4 powerhouses of the alien race could last. Time passed by bit. About half an hour later, an angry dragon roar suddenly sounded in the calm abyss. Roar! When the dragon roar sounded, the abyss trembled again. Chapter 1786. There was no doubt that the 4 foreign race experts had encountered the glazed fire dragon, and the 2 sides were fighting fiercely. More than 30 experts around the abyss were all staring at the movements in the abyss. Surging crimson fire and colorful magical brilliance gushed out like spring water and flew high into the sky. Some weaker warriors hurriedly retreated far away, not daring to be too close to the abyss for fear of being affected. Earth-shaking fighting sounds constantly came from the abyss. Even the silhouettes of fiery dragons flashed across the abyss. After about 100 breaths of time, the loud noises dissipated, and the abyss returned to calm. The 4 foreign race experts never appeared again. Everyone knew without guessing that they must have been buried in the dragon's belly. For a time, many experts felt uneasy and even more fearful and worried. Some experts who wanted to take advantage of the situation could only give up the idea and make further plans. Some weaker experts knew that they were inferior to the 4 foreign race experts and had no hope of obtaining the glazed fire dragon, so they left wisely. Ji Tianqing was still the same as before. He hid in the mountain peak calmly and waited patiently. Next, the abyss was quiet for 2 days. During these 2 days, some experts came from all directions and gathered around the abyss. There were also some experts who lost patience and confidence and left the abyss in disappointment. 2 days later, another group of experts stepped into the abyss. This group of experts was an adventurer team. They had been exploring and searching for treasures in the ruins of God. They were quite famous in the adventure world and were ranked in the top 5 forces. They had a total of 14 people, and the leader had the strength of the 7th stage of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. The other dozen people were also elite experts, and their strength was above the 4th stage of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. Looking at the surroundings of the heavenly fire abyss, this group was the strongest and had the most hope of obtaining the glazed fire dragon. When this adventurer team entered the abyss, the remaining 20 or so experts were a little panicked. Their hearts were filled with hesitation and anxiety. They didn't dare to enter the abyss for fear of being killed by the fire dragon. However, they were also worried that the adventurer team would successfully capture the glazed fire dragon. Therefore, everyone was worried about their gains and losses. They were in a dilemma and their mood was very torturous. A few powerhouses weighed the pros and cons for a moment before following him into the abyss, wanting to get a share of the loot. Yun Yao was also a little worried. She sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianqing. Tianqing, that adventurer team has a lot of people, and they are all elite experts. I'm afraid they have a high chance of capturing the glazed fire dragon. Are we still going to wait? Why don't we follow them in and act according to the situation? Ji Tianqing calmly sat inside the cave. Chuckling, he said, "Don't worry. If that adventurer team had succeeded, the glazed flame dragon would have long since been snatched away. How could it have survived until now? They are the best cannon fodder, and they can consume the glazed fire dragon's strength." With that, he pointed at the southwest and northeast corners of the abyss and said with a playful tone, "What I'm really guarding against now are those two groups." Yun Yao probed with her divine sense and found that there were 9 tribulation stage powerhouses lurking in the southwest corner of the abyss. They were obviously in the same group. In the northeast corner of the abyss, there were 3 experts hiding, and all of them were women. There was a white-haired old woman, a middle-aged woman, and a beautiful young woman. On the surface, these 3 women didn't seem to be a threat. However, Yun Yao vaguely felt that the white-haired old woman with a walking stick had unfathomable strength. She frowned and asked, "Tianqing, do you mean that those 2 groups are like us? They are very patient and want to take advantage of the situation?" "That's right." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Those who are in a hurry to enter the abyss are all cannon fodder. Only the 3 of us have a chance of capturing the glazed fire dragon. Among the 3 women, the white-haired old woman is the strongest. I'm afraid she is close to a martial sage. She is our strongest competitor. As for the 9 experts in the southwest corner, their auras are very gloomy and bloodthirsty. I'm afraid they are evil forces or adventurer teams. Since they are so patient, we have to be cautious." Yun Yao nodded to show that she understood. She secretly observed the 2 groups of people. Not long after, an earth-shattering dragon roar came from the abyss again. Surging heavenly fire and dazzling magic power gushed out like a fountain, covering the sky for hundreds of miles. The commotion caused by the battle this time was particularly shocking. The entire abyss was shaking violently, and the surrounding cliffs and precipitous cliffs were shaking so much that cracks appeared. Moreover, as many as 20 tribulation stage powerhouses entered the abyss. The battle lasted for half an hour before it gradually came to a stop. In the end, only 2 powerhouses escaped from the abyss covered in blood. One of them was the leader of the adventurer team, a powerhouse in the 7th stage of the tribulation stage. The other person was an old man in a black robe. He followed the adventurer team into the abyss to take advantage of the situation. Both of them were seriously injured. Their auras were very chaotic, and their expressions were extremely frightened. The leader of the adventurer team had lost an arm. He desperately performed a secret technique and turned into a streak of blood light to fly out of the abyss. After escaping from the abyss, he flew away without looking back. The old man in the black robe behind him was very unlucky. He was about to fly out of the abyss and was about to escape danger. Suddenly, a huge fiery red figure flew out of the abyss. Swoosh! It was a red divine dragon that was hundreds of miles long and thousands of feet thick. Its entire body was wrapped in surging golden heavenly fire. Roar! It raised its head to the sky, opened its huge dragon mouth, and spat out a mighty stream of golden flames. The severely injured old man in the black robe had lost both of his legs, so his strength was greatly reduced. After being hit by the golden flames, he immediately let out a heart-wrenching scream. His entire body was burned into black ashes. In just 2 short breaths, his physical body was destroyed and turned into ashes in the golden flames. His divine soul was also severely injured, and he fled in terror. However, the glaze fire dragon waved its huge front claws and grabbed his soul, crushing it directly. The old man in the black robe was killed by the glaze fire dragon in front of everyone. Then, the glaze fire dragon let out a majestic roar. Its indifferent eyes swept around the abyss before it turned back into the abyss. Obviously, it knew that there were many powerhouses lurking around the abyss. It was warning everyone that if they dared to enter its lair, only death would await them. At this moment, many powerhouses were shocked by the power of the divine dragon. They were filled with fear and felt chills all over their bodies. In just a short while, 7 groups of powerhouses had fled the abyss. They did not dare to have any ideas about the Glaze Fire Dragon. Only 5 groups of people stayed. However, 2 groups of people were hesitating and did not dare to act rashly. Ji Tianqing, who had been very patient all this time, suddenly changed his attitude. His eyes shone with a bright light. He looked at Yun Yao with a smile and said through voice transmission, "Yao Yao, the time has come. It's time for us to strike." Chapter 1787. All the experts who had entered the abyss had been killed. Only one of them had escaped with serious injuries. After that, the glazed fire dragon showed up and warned everyone in a domineering manner. At this critical moment, whoever entered the abyss would be courting death, wouldn't it? Yun Yao looked at Ji Tianqing doubtfully. She was a little worried. Ji Tianqing smiled and explained, "The glazed fire dragon's intelligence is no less than that of human beings. It also knows the principle of what is false is true, and what is true is false." In the past few days, it has been besieged and hunted by various experts. Its vitality must have been greatly damaged. It can't maintain its peak condition. If not, it wouldn't have escaped back to the abyss to hide and expose its lair to everyone. This can only mean that it has reached the point where it can't do anything. Yun Yao immediately understood what he meant. She said, "I understand now. You mean that if the glazed fire dragon had maintained its peak condition, it wouldn't have been able to hide in its lair. The experts couldn't have chased it and found this abyss. Since it hid in the abyss, it proves that its vitality has been greatly damaged. Those experts who entered the abyss before were all killed by it. It's just bluffing to intimidate us." Ji Tianqing nodded and continued, "That's right. It's strong in appearance but weak in reality. That's why it showed up to scare everyone away. But it neglected one point. If it hadn't shown up, we wouldn't have been able to determine its condition. Now that it has shown up, I'm even more certain that its strength has been weakened. I've checked it just now. Although it tried to hide it, I could still sense that its divine soul aura was a little chaotic. In addition, there was a faint black aura in its pale golden eyes, which proved that it was injured. Moreover, the color of the reverse scale on its neck, which was hidden among the many dragon scales, was slightly dim. These signs can prove that its vitality has been greatly damaged." Yun Yao opened her eyes slightly, revealing a look of disbelief. She asked in surprise and doubt, "Tianqing, how do you know these things? Why do you know so much about the divine dragon?" Ji Tianqing didn't explain anything. He just smiled and pointed at his head. Yun Yao could vaguely guess that this must have something to do with Kenshin's memories. Just now, the glazed fire dragon only appeared for a short moment. You actually observed it so carefully and even discovered these problems. It's really incredible. After saying that, she used her divine sense to look at the other 2 groups of powerhouses and said worriedly, "Tianqing, those 2 groups of powerhouses can no longer hold back and have started to take action. Could it be that they have also noticed that the glazed fire dragon's strength has greatly decreased?" Ji Tianqing said with certainty, "At most, they can only sense that something is wrong with the glazed fiery dragon's soul. As for the black gas in the dragon's eyes and the changes in the reverse scale, they definitely wouldn't be able to tell. After all, no one knows Shenlong better than I do." While he was talking to Yun Yao, the 2 groups of experts had already moved. The 9 experts from the southwest corner of the abyss were the first to enter the abyss. The 9 experts seemed to be intrepid and reckless, but in reality, they were very cautious and had a tacit understanding. They spread out, and 4 experts took the lead to open the path. The leader was in the middle, and the other 4 followed behind. Everyone flew down unhurriedly. Not long after, they passed through the invisible barrier and disappeared from everyone's divine sense range. Immediately after, the 3 women from the northeast corner of the abyss also entered the abyss. The white-haired old woman leaned on her walking stick and walked in front calmly. The middle-aged woman and the young woman followed behind, on guard at any time. After 100 breaths of time, they also entered the abyss and disappeared. At this time, there were only 3 groups of people left around the abyss. In addition to Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao, there were also 2 groups of Tribulation Realm powerhouses. The 2 groups of powerhouses became even more hesitant. They wanted to follow them into the abyss, but they were also afraid of the glazed fire dragon's strength. Ji Tianxing took a look. One of the two groups of powerhouses was from a sect. There were a total of 5 people, all wearing standard robes, and their behavior was relatively upright. Coincidentally, among these 5 people, there were Martial Lord Brightsword and Chen Yu. Ji Tianxing secretly sized them up a few times, then left the mountain peak with Yun Yao and stepped into the abyss. Let's go. It's time for us to go down. He and Yun Yao remained invisible. They passed through the raging flame vortex and approached the bottom of the abyss. In a short while, the two of them had dived 30 miles deep. A layer of dark golden flame light barrier blocked their path. This huge light barrier was like a golden mirror. It was a naturally formed array formation. Ji Tianxing used a small trick to break through the flame light barrier and continued to dive down with Yun Yao. On the mountain peaks around the abyss, only 2 groups of powerhouses were still hesitating and weighing the pros and cons. Although Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were invisible, these 2 groups of powerhouses were quite strong and could detect their auras. Therefore, these 2 groups of people were even more conflicted. Martial Lord Brightsword looked at the golden-robed elder beside him and said solemnly, "Senior brother Jean, don't hesitate anymore. Let's go down as well." The young man and woman I mentioned to you before also entered the abyss. That white-robed youth attracted 9 bolts of heavenly lightning and successfully passed through them. Chen Yu and I saw it with our own eyes. He also killed a 7th-level transcending tribulation stage powerhouse. We also saw it with our own eyes. I guarantee with my life that that kid is definitely the #1 monstrous genius on the continent. Since he dares to enter the abyss, he must have found something. We just need to follow him in secret, and wait for an opportunity to make a move. The golden-robed elder was tall and sturdy. His face and skin were bronze, and his pair of white eyebrows were very eye-catching. He frowned and thought for a while, then said in a solemn tone, "Junior brother Brightsword, I believe in your and Chen Yu's experience and knowledge. But the 2 of us are 2 of the 4 powerhouses of the Azure sect. These 3 juniors are the most promising elite disciples of our sect. If we rashly enter the abyss, if we encounter an accident and die under the claws of the glazed fire dragon, it will be a fatal blow to our sect. At that time, our sect will definitely suffer a great loss and fall from a first-rate sect to a third-rate force." Chen Yu thought for a moment and advised, "Master, this disciple suggests that you reconsider Martial Uncle Brightsword's suggestion. Previously, there were already so many powerhouses that were slaughtered by the glazed fire dragon, and many powerhouses were scared away. However, there were still 3 groups of powerhouses that entered the abyss, including that adulterous pair. Could it be that those 3 groups of powerhouses are not afraid of death? This disciple doesn't think so. They must have discovered that there is something wrong with the glazed fire dragon, so they dare to enter." The golden-robed elder frowned. His eyes flickered with light and he was still considering. Martial Lord Brightsword continued to persuade, "Senior brother Jean, our Azure sect has already been bullied by the other 2 forces for hundreds of years and has never had a chance to turn things around. As the saying goes, wealth comes from danger. If we enter the abyss and are lucky enough to obtain the glazed fire dragon, everything will be solved." Chapter 1788. Under the persuasion of Brightsword Martial Lord and Chen Yu, the golden-robed elder considered for a long time and finally made up his mind. Perhaps the glazed fire dragon in the abyss is our sect's greatest hope to reverse our fate. Since that's the case, let's take the risk and fight with all our might. After that, the golden-robed elder also led everyone into the abyss. After this group of experts entered the abyss, there was only 1 group left outside the abyss. These experts discussed for a long time, but in the end, greed defeated reason and they also entered the abyss. So far, a total of 5 groups of experts had entered the abyss, all wanting to obtain the glazed fire dragon. After passing through the natural formation light barrier, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao flew down for another 100 miles before reaching the bottom of the abyss. Beneath their feet was a dark golden desert. The terrain was uneven, and the ground was covered with endless yellow sand. Of course, the air was filled with manic crimson fire. The rocks and golden sand on the ground were also burned red by the crimson fire. The temperature was extremely high. Flames filled all directions. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were like fish swimming in a sea of fire. The 2 of them could not hear any sounds or movements, nor could they see their surroundings clearly. They could only slowly grope forward. I thought that the bottom of the abyss was a magma lake. I didn't expect it to be a desert. Yun Yao sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianqing as she investigated the surroundings. Ji Tianqing also held the Heaven Barrier sword and was on guard against the surroundings at all times. He replied through telepathy, "The celestial fire of azure glass in this abyss is more powerful than the one outside, and its temperature is twice as high. If I'm not wrong, this abyss is the core of the flaming mountain. It might hide the source of the glazed fire dragon." Yun Yao nodded in agreement. Yes, if not, the glazed fire dragon wouldn't have used this place as its lair. By the way, why aren't the two groups of people who came in first? The glazed fire dragon doesn't seem to have appeared either? Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment before explaining, "Maybe both sides are very cautious and haven't fought yet. I reckon that this area is very vast and there are too many places to hide. The glazed fire dragon won't appear so easily." As it turned out, his guess was right. He and Yun Yao had advanced for hundreds of miles in the desert, but they still hadn't reached the end. The size of the Golden Sand Desert was much larger than they had expected. Not only that, the whole process was very peaceful. They did not find the other two groups of people, nor did they find the glazed fire dragon. An hour later, the two of them traveled 8,000 miles and finally arrived at the end of the desert. In front of him was a grotesquely shaped cave. It was very tall and wide. Countless caves of different sizes were connected together like a huge maze. Ji Tianqing stopped outside a cave that was thousands of feet high and observed for a while. Suddenly, he discovered something and hurriedly brought Yun Yao into the cave. In the spacious cave, there were a few pieces of gravel piled up in a corner. There were traces of sword qi on the ground, as well as a few pieces of armor. It seems that the two groups of experts from before have already arrived here and fought with the glazed fire dragon. As he spoke, Ji Tianqing picked up the pieces of armor on the ground. After looking at them for a while, he came to a conclusion. It should be that group of adventurers. Among the 9 experts, someone was wearing this kind of armor. However, when did they fight with the glazed fire dragon? Why didn't they make any noise? When his voice fell, a sneer suddenly sounded from the depths of the cave. "Ha ha ha! You're really observant. I didn't set up a trap for you in vain." This was the voice of a middle-aged man. His tone was cold, and there was a trace of hatred and killing intent in it. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's expressions changed. They released their divine senses and probed into the depths of the cave. They saw a man in black armor walking out from behind a pile of grotesquely shaped rocks. This man was 10 feet tall and as strong as an iron tower. His skin was dark, and there were a few scars on his cold and ferocious face. There was a huge spider pattern. He had his hands behind his back. His aura was confident and domineering, and his whole body was emitting a cold killing intent. Ji Tianqing immediately recognized that this man was the leader of the 8 experts. He had the strength of the 8th stage of the Crossing Calamity realm. He looked at the man in black armor's attire and vaguely guessed something. He frowned and asked, "You deliberately left traces here and set up an ambush to lure us here? If I'm not wrong, you should be the leader of the Black Feather Gang, right?" "That's right. I'm the leader of the Black Feather Gang." The man in black armor sneered even more. He said in a mocking tone, "You're very smart. It's a pity that you met me. You'll definitely die." As he spoke, he stepped across the sea of fire and stood 1,000 feet away from Ji Tianqing. He waved his hand, and a few figures immediately appeared around the cave, blocking the cave entrance and several passages. Those were 8 experts in the Crossing Calamity realm. They were all bandits of the Black Feather Gang. They formed a circle and surrounded Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. They stared at the two of them with sneers on their faces, and their bodies were bursting with killing intent. Ji Tianqing remained calm in the face of this change, his expression still indifferent. He looked at Yu and asked, "It seems that you've already planned this. You've already targeted us before entering the abyss?" "Of course." Yu didn't hide it and answered truthfully, "Yi sent me a message before he died. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to save him. I had planned to kill you to avenge Yi after dealing with the glazed fire dragon. I didn't expect that you two would be so daring to come to the abyss of heavenly fire to die. If I don't tear you two into pieces, wouldn't I be letting down your good intentions?" After that, Yu laughed wildly. The other 8 bandits also sneered unscrupulously. Everyone was complacent. They believed that Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao couldn't escape and would definitely die. Yun Yao's face was cold. She quietly clenched the hilt of the reverse water sword, ready to attack at any time. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, remained calm. His lips curled into a cold smile as he said, "Actually, after I killed Yi Ya, I expected this to happen. I guessed that I would definitely meet you after coming to the abyss. But I still came. Guess why?" He Yu was stunned. He frowned and asked with a gloomy face, "Why?" "Because." The sneer on Ji Tianqing's face grew even wider as he slowly said, "You clowns are nothing in my eyes." As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. All was silent in the cave. The 8 bandits were dumbfounded. Even He Yu was stunned. He stared at Ji Tianqing in surprise. After a while he came back to his senses and said with a laugh, "Ha ha ha, I've really learned something today. It's the first time I've seen someone as arrogant as you. You're about to die, but you still dare to boast shamelessly and say such ignorant and ridiculous words. I really admire your courage." Chapter 1789. He Yu and the 8 experts were all enraged. Killing intent burst out from their bodies, and a dazzling brilliance of mana lit up. "Kid, you are so arrogant that you are ignorant. Little bastard, you are courting death. I will cut you into 8 pieces right now. Chop the men into minced meat, catch the women and let everyone have a taste of them first." The bandits clamored with murderous intent, waving their swords and weapons, eager to try. However, before He Yu gave the order to attack, Ji Tianqing had already taken the lead. He waved the Burial of Heaven's sword as fast as lightning, slashing out a dazzling sword light towards He Yu. "Swing the sword." The 300-meter-long dark golden sword light burst forth with violent and fierce sword chi, sweeping towards He Yu in an indestructible manner. "Little bastard, you are tired of living." He Yu shouted angrily, pulling out his treasured saber and waving it. 3 dark red saber lights came and collided with the golden sword light, producing a muffled bang 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 sound. Suddenly, the saber light and sword light collapsed, exploding into fragments that filled the sky, splashing in all directions. The 2 sides were evenly matched for the first time, and neither side had the upper hand. "You really have some ability. No wonder you are so arrogant." He Yu was inexplicably shocked, angrily shouted, waving his saber again. Ji Tianqing's left hand pinched a seal, and immediately opened the entrance of the sword world. With a flash of brilliance, Ji Bai and Xueqi rushed out of the sword world, appearing in the cave with a sea of fire. The 2 immediately scattered, waving their sabers and swords to join the battle, pouncing on the surrounding bandits. Yun Yao also used her unique sword technique, waving the reverse water sword, slashing out dozens of ice sword light, fighting with the 2 bandits. Ji Tianqing stepped on the Big Dipper steps, holding the Burial of Heaven's sword, in a confident and invincible manner, facing He Yu head-on. Under his control, the Burial of Heaven's sword seemed to come alive, turning into an illusory black shadow, constantly blotting out sword light that blotted out the sky. Hundreds of sword light, intertwined into a complex and profound sword net, enveloping He Yu. Pang pang pang. Saber light and sword shadows collided, producing a series of dull and loud noises. The ultimate saber technique that He Yu executed was actually blocked by Ji Tianqing, unable to unleash its power. The 2 of them exchanged more than 10 moves in a row, but Ji Tianqing did not fall into a disadvantageous position. With his wondrous swordsmanship, he was able to neutralize all of He Yu's secret techniques. He Yu was completely shocked. He revealed an extremely shocked expression and couldn't help but let out a low roar. "Damned little bastard! How can he possess such terrifying combat strength when he's only at the first stage of the Tribulation Transcendence realm?" He was an expert who had gone through 8 heavenly tribulations, a peak martial lord who was second only to the martial saint. He was famous around the ruins of God and his might shook the world. As long as he did not encounter a martial saint, he believed that no one could stop him. But now the white-robed young man, who was only at the first stage of the crossing tribulation realm, was able to compete with him as an equal. How could he not be astonished? He even had the misconception that he was not facing a young junior, but a Sword Dao martial saint. Soon, 100 breaths had passed. The 2 of them had exchanged more than 200 moves, but they were still evenly matched. Unknowingly, the two of them had also left the cave and moved to the sky above the golden sand desert. The two of them temporarily stopped fighting and stood in the sky above the desert, facing each other from a distance of 10,000 feet. The spacious and huge cave was also destroyed by the aftermath of the battle, collapsing into ruins. The 8 bandits of the Black Feather Gang joined forces to besiege Yun Yao and Ji Bai and Xueqi. They obviously had the upper hand. Everyone also left the ruins and the battlefield moved to the desert. Ji Bai and Xueqi were both injured. Their robes were stained with blood, and their expressions were somewhat ugly. However, the two of them seemed to not know pain. They ignored their injuries and bravely charged forward to protect Yun Yao. Yun Yao was not injured. With the power of the reverse water divine sword, no one could fight her head-on. However, she could only injure bandits who were at the 3rd or 4th stage of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. She could not injure those who were stronger. After all, she was only at the 1st stage of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. It was already very rare for her to be able to surpass 3 stages. The bandits' injuries were even more serious. Their bodies were covered with sword wounds, and blood kept seeping out, dyeing their robes and armor. However, these people were all villains who licked blood from their blades. They had been tempered by bloody storms and stepped on mountains of corpses and seas of blood to grow up. These injuries were nothing to them. It would only stimulate their ferocity and make them even crazier. Everyone's attacks were even more fierce. They were fighting with their lives on the line. They would rather be injured than let Yun Yao and the other two go. Therefore, the pressure on Yun Yao and Ji Bai increased sharply, and the situation became even more dangerous. The two sides fought fiercely in the desert and kept moving into the depths of the desert. Along the way, violent 5-colored hurricanes blew up, and waves of earth-shattering sounds exploded. He Yu stared at Ji Tianxing, who was 10,000 feet away, and his face was as gloomy as ice. The previous fierce attacks had consumed a lot of his magic power. He took the opportunity to circulate his energy and adjust his breathing. Ji Tianxing was not in a hurry to attack. His figure stood proudly in the air with his left hand behind his back and his right hand holding the Burial of Heaven sword, pointing diagonally to the ground. "Hey you, can you still laugh now?" There was a trace of mockery in the cold and indifferent voice. He Yu frowned fiercely. The veins on his face throbbed a few times, and anger surged in his heart. "Kid, I really underestimated you. I didn't expect you to have such strength. No wonder you could kill Yiya. However, it's too early for you to be happy. If you only have this little ability, you'll still die." As he spoke, a black light flashed in He Yu's left hand, and a square disc array appeared. The palm-sized disc array was quite exquisite. It was engraved with thousands of array patterns, and there were 12 lifelike statues on the edge. Those statues were all strange beasts. There were pitch-black crows, ferocious-looking spiders, black scorpions, black snakes, and so on. The disc array floated in front of He Yu. It spun and emitted a cold black light. He Yu formed a seal with both hands and began to cast a secret technique, injecting majestic magic power into the disc array. Swoosh! Soon, the mysterious disc array expanded thousands of times, becoming the size of a palace. With a bang, it smashed into the desert. The golden sand buried the disc array, but an overwhelming black light gushed out from the ground, spreading in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the cold black light enveloped a radius of 50 miles, forming a huge light shield, sealing this area. In the sealing array, the turbulent colored glass heavenly fire was also dispelled, turning into a pitch-black void. He Yu held a treasured saber in his hand, standing in the void, and sneered proudly. "Kid, now I'll let you see the power of the baleful black feather array. In this array, I am the master of heaven and earth, and you are an ant to be slaughtered." Dozens of miles away, Ji Tianxing stood in the pitch-black void, his expression still unchanged. Chapter 1790. Ever since it devoured the divine dragon crystal, the little black dragon had been in seclusion in the sword world. It was extremely diligent and serious. Now, it had reached the 8th firmament essence soul realm and was not far from the tribulation transcendence realm. Although it was oblivious to worldly matters and only wanted to refine the divine dragon crystal. However, it was suddenly awakened by Ji Tianxing and heard that there was a pleasant surprise for it. It immediately became interested. It hurriedly ended its cultivation and asked expectantly, "Old Ji, What pleasant surprise did you prepare for me? Ji Tianqing said with a serious expression. Considering that you have been single all this while, you might be lonely. That's why I came all the way to the fiery mountain, despite the dangers, to find you a wife. The little black dragon was instantly dumbfounded. It remained silent for a long time. The little black dragon, who had always been honest and upright, was a little dazed by this sudden surprise. After a while it said in a low, muffled voice, "Old Ji, didn't you say that Qianyue and I should help each other and love each other?" "What do you mean love each other?" Ji Tianqing said unhappily. "I only said that the two of you should help each other. I didn't randomly set you up. Besides, the two of you are of different races. You can only be friends, not partners." "Ah." The little black dragon asked weakly, "Then do you mean that you have already found a dragon?" "That's right. Furthermore, it's a divine dragon." Ji Tianqing answered without any hesitation. The little black dragon found it somewhat unbelievable as it pressed. "Are you sure it's a divine dragon? And it's female?" "Of course. I've already confirmed it," Ji Tianqing said solemnly. The little black dragon hesitated for a moment before asking nervously, "Then what do I need to do now? Come out and meet it? Will it despise me?" Ji Tianqing persuaded with a smile. "Don't be nervous. It's not like I'm asking you to go on a blind date. What you need to do is very simple. Just come out and show your face." "That's simple?" The little black dragon was rather surprised as its tone turned a lot more relaxed. Ji Tianqing hurriedly nodded. "Of course. Don't dawdle. It will be too late." As he spoke, he opened the sword world. The little black dragon did not doubt him and immediately flew out. Shwa! In a flash of black light, the little black dragon appeared in the pitch-black void and circled Ji Tianqing twice. Seeing that it was pitch black all around and that the world was filled with a terrifying suppressive force, it was a little stunned. "Old Ji, what's going on? Where's the female dragon?" Ji Tianqing patted its head and said, "Don't be anxious. If we want to see that female dragon, we have to deal with that guy first." After saying that, he pointed at He Yu who was standing in the void a few dozen miles away. The little black dragon showed no fear and immediately transformed into its divine dragon form. Its body swelled to more than 10 li long, resembling a pitch-black mountain range. After He Yu cast the baleful black feather array, he had been controlling the operation of the array, silently accumulating the power of the array. At the same time, he was also observing Ji Tianqing's reaction. If Ji Tianqing tried to resist, he would suppress him with thunderous means. However, he was stunned to find that Ji Tianqing's reaction was a little strange. He did not seem to care about the array at all. Not only did he not defend or resist, but he was also muttering something to the treasure sword. Just as He Yu was filled with doubts, a small dragon suddenly appeared beside Ji Tianqing. The little dragon flew around twice before shining with a dazzling cold light, and it instantly transformed into a giant dragon that was more than 10 li long. He Yu was dumbfounded on the spot. He was dumbfounded. Heavens! A dragon! That's actually a black dragon. That damned bastard! How can he have a black dragon? At that moment, He Yu was so shocked that his heart beat wildly, and he was petrified. He could not believe his eyes. Aside from the glazed fire dragon, this was the second time he had seen a divine dragon. Legend has it that there are only a few divine dragons on Shenwu continent, and they are all controlled by the 3 war gods. That brat has just reached the tribulation realm, but he also has a divine dragon? His aptitude is also so monstrous. Could he be the son of one of the war gods, a noble divine child? With He Yu's knowledge, this was the only guess he could make. Aside from the war god's sons, he could not think of anyone else who could be as monstrous as Ji Tianqing, who also had a divine dragon. At that moment, He Yu instinctively felt some fear, and his heart was filled with worry and lingering fear. He Yu's strength was great, and he was the president of the Black Feather Gang. He was quite famous around the ruins of God. However, he could not be compared to a noble divine child. The difference between the two was like the difference between the gravel on the ground and the stars in the sky. It's over. Our Black Feather Gang has actually provoked a divine child. We're in big trouble now. He Yu cursed inwardly. His heart felt as if it had fallen into an ice cellar, and his entire body was ice cold. But right at this moment, Ji Tianqing had already charged over with the black dragon in tow. Sky-splitting sword. Even though they were still 10 li apart, Ji Tianqing was already holding his sword with both hands and slashing out with all his might, creating a gigantic sword light that could split the heavens and earth. The gigantic golden sword, which was thousands of feet long, slashed down from the sky towards Yu with a power that could destroy everything. Yu immediately came to his senses. His cold eyes flashed with determination as he instantly made up his mind. Motherfucker! So what if you're a divine child? If you want to take my life, I'll kill you first. Anyway, in this abyss, all traces can be covered up. Even the war gods may not know. Yu made up his mind and hurriedly waved his palm to cast a spell, controlling the ceiling formation to block the sword light. Swoosh! 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 800 sharp black blades appeared in the void from all directions, forming a black sword net that charged towards the sword light. Boom! Crack! The sky-splitting sword and the black sword net collided fiercely, creating a thunderous sound. Hundreds of sharp black blades were smashed into pieces and scattered in the void. After the gigantic golden sword light broke through the sword net, its power was reduced by 70% to 80%. With a loud boom, it struck the ground. Instantly, a 20 li long gully appeared on the ground that was covered with golden sand and gravel. Huge amounts of earth and rock splashed out. Ji Tianqing's ultimate sword technique was neutralized. He opened the third eye on his forehead and released endless thunderbolts. Thunderbolt! Golden, purple and blue thunderbolts surged out like an endless tide, forming a 50 zhang long thunderbolt light pillar that blasted towards Yu. Yu's expression changed drastically. He was both shocked and angry. He hurriedly controlled the ceiling formation to block the thunderbolt attack. Illusory killing shadow. Under his control, 12 mountain-like phantoms were released from the pitch-black light shield, and they all pounced towards the thunderbolt. The 12,000 zhang tall shadows were 12 kinds of evil beasts, including black crows, black scorpions, black spiders, black snakes, and so on. Boom! Crack! Chapter 1791. The sound of thunder was deafening, and the lightning illuminated the void for dozens of miles. The powerful shockwave spread out in all directions, causing a violent hurricane. The 12 exotic beast shadows collapsed, and the power of the three-colored sacred thunder was exhausted. It soon dissipated. Ji Tianqing and Yu were tied again, and neither of them had the upper hand. One could imagine the shock in Yu's heart. He was a cross-calamity stage 8 expert, and he had used a tribulation-level array disk to set up the seal array. He thought that any expert below the martial sage realm would die as long as they were sealed by the array. There was no way they could survive. However, Ji Tianqing had done it, and he had not been at a disadvantage since the beginning. Damn bastard! Has he reached the point where he is invincible below the martial sage realm? That's impossible. Even if he is the divine son, he can't be so powerful. Yu roared in his heart, and he was so angry that he was about to lose his mind. This was simply against the common sense of martial arts, and he could not believe it. At the same time, the black dragon pounced on Yu, releasing his secret skill with all his might. Yu took a closer look and saw that the black dragon only had the strength of the primordial soul realm. He was shocked and disdainful. Humph! How dare a baby dragon of the primordial soul realm be so presumptuous in front of me? Yu snorted disdainfully, and he waved his palm to release a black light, which slashed toward the black dragon. Boom! The black light destroyed the magic arts released by the black dragon and hit it, causing it to fly backward. Yu immediately chased after it, and he waved his saber to release a few saber radiances that were 1,000 feet long, which enveloped the black dragon's body. However, at the critical moment, the black dragon opened its mouth and spat out a black dragon breath. Swoosh! The black dragon breath passed through the saber radiance like a water column and hit Yu hard. With a muffled bang, Yu was blown away, and his body was wrapped in the black dragon breath. The incomparable cold air, along with the horrifying poisonous gas, immediately froze his physical body and penetrated into his body. Even though he used his internal energy to disperse the cold air, he still felt half of his body go numb. He completely lost consciousness and was unable to move. Black Feather was dumbfounded. He found it unbelievable that an Essence Soul Realm black dragon had such capabilities. Bastard! That brat is already monstrous enough. Why is his black dragon so strange as well? While cursing in his heart, Yu hurriedly circulated his energy to resist the invasion of the poison. At the same time, Ji Tianqing swung his sword and shattered a few saber lights. Then, he charged over with his sword in hand. Azure Dragon's Sacred Sword. The Sword of Burial of Heaven immediately expanded, becoming a gigantic sword that was 3,000 meters tall. Ji Tianqing also turned into a dazzling golden light and became one with the Sword of Burial of Heaven. The giant sword unleashed a destructive power as it slashed toward Yu with all its might, accompanied by the image of a huge azure dragon. Boom! Half of Yu's body was paralyzed and he was unable to dodge at all. He was immediately struck by the giant's sword and exploded with a loud bang. He was sent flying backward by the giant's sword. His entire left arm was cut off at the root. A large amount of black blood splattered out as he let out an ear-piercing scream. After witnessing the power of Ji Tianqing and the Black Dragon, he became even more cautious and did not dare to let his guard down. Next, he circulated his internal energy to suppress his injuries while manipulating the power of the ceiling formation to resist the attacks of Ji Tianqing and the Black Dragon with all his might. The two sides fought fiercely in the formation and were locked in a fierce battle. It was impossible to determine the winner in a short period of time. Outside the ceiling formation, in the Golden Sand Desert about 100 miles away, Yun Yao and Ji Bai were defending against the siege of several bandits. Originally, there were 8 bandits. After such a long battle, one of them had been killed by Yun Yao. The remaining 7 bandits had also suffered serious injuries and were dripping with blood. Ji Bai and Xueqi's injuries were also very serious. Their bodies were covered with blood and crisscrossed wounds. However, their willpower was very tenacious. They had been clenching their teeth and holding on, swearing not to retreat. Yun Yao had consumed a lot of her magical power. Her face was pale, her hair was a little messy, and her white dress was stained with blood. I wonder how Tianqing is doing? Can he deal with Yu? Her heart was filled with anxiety. She was worried about Ji Tianqing's safety and the current situation. Without external help, it was impossible for her and Ji Bai to defeat the 7 bandits with their strength. It was already incredible that they could hold on until now without being killed. At this moment, Yun Yao was looking forward to Ji Tianqing creating a miracle and defeating Yu. But at this moment, a huge fiery red figure suddenly appeared in the sea of fire above the desert. It was a fiery divine dragon that was 10 miles long and its entire body was red and golden. Obviously, it was the glazed fire dragon. It had shrunk its body by 10 times and quietly passed through the sea of fire, arriving near the battlefield. Its dark golden dragon eyes flickered with cold killing intent. It secretly observed for a moment. When it saw Yun Yao and the bandits fighting fiercely, it could not help but reveal a mocking sneer. However, everyone was in the midst of fighting, and no one noticed its existence. A moment later, the glazed fire dragon seized the opportunity and launched an attack. A burly bandit had just been repelled by Ji Bai's saberlight and was sent flying backward with blood all over his body. The glazed fire dragon suddenly teleported over, raised its huge front claw, and slapped it fiercely. Bang! With a muffled explosion, the bandit was shattered by the dragon claw and his body collapsed on the spot. A divine soul escaped and flew into the distance in a daze, trying to escape. However, the glazed fire dragon waved its claw again and captured the divine soul, immediately crushing it into pieces. After quickly killing a bandit, the glazed fire dragon lurked in the sea of fire again, silently. 20 breaths later, it seized the opportunity to kill another bandit. Only then did everyone realize that the situation was not right and realize that something was wrong. The 5 bandits were filled with fear. They all stopped attacking and looked around vigilantly. Yun Yao, Ji Bai, and Xueqi also sensed that something was wrong. They quickly gathered together and slowly retreated into the distance. The glazed fire dragon did not hide anymore and rushed toward the bandits with a domineering aura. The bandits were scared out of their wits and fought back with all their strength. After an earth-shattering battle, 4 of the 5 bandits were killed by the glazed fire dragon. Only one of them was seriously injured and only a divine soul was left. He was lucky enough to escape. The glazed fire dragon did not chase after him. It immediately pounced on Yun Yao and the other 2. Ji Bai and Xueqi were both in a serious mood. With the determination to die, they bravely rushed forward to the glazed fire dragon. However, when Yun Yao waved the reverse water divine sword to attack the glazed fire dragon, a strange scene appeared. The glazed fire dragon stopped attacking and turned around to escape without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, its figure disappeared into the sea of fire and disappeared without a trace. Seeing this scene, Yun Yao and Ji Bai and Xueqi heaved a sigh of relief and secretly said that they were lucky. However, after a few breaths, a powerful dragon roar sounded 100 miles away. Chapter 1792. In the desert 100 miles away from Yun Yao, there was a huge black light shield. She knew very well that the light shield was the sealing formation released by Yu. Ji Tianqing and Yu were fighting in the light shield. And now, the roar of the glazed fire dragon sounded near the light shield. What it meant was self-evident. Her expression changed immediately, and she hurried to the sealing formation with Ji Bai and Xueqi. Ji Tianqing and the black dragon were attacking Yu with all their strength. The two sides had already exchanged hundreds of blows in the formation, but they were still unable to determine the winner. Yu's injuries had been stabilized, and his broken arm had been reconstructed with a secret technique, so he was fine for the time being. However, right at this moment, a loud explosion suddenly sounded from outside the formation. The black light shield within a radius of 50 miles started to shake violently, rippling out layers upon layers of ripples. The northwest corner of the light shield seemed to have suffered a heavy blow, and dense cracks appeared as if it had been hit by some kind of powerful force. The sealing formation was damaged, and its power was greatly reduced. Yu also suffered from the backlash of the formation's power, and his body trembled, and his face turned pale. Ji Tianqing was not shocked, but happy. He took the opportunity to attack Yu, and raised his left palm to release endless golden flames. God-slaying spear. The mysterious and terrifying golden flames condensed into a 30-meter-long golden divine spear, and it instantly pierced through Yu's chest. Bang! His magic power shield and body armor were as fragile as paper under the golden divine spear, and they were directly shattered. The divine spear pierced through his chest, flew out from his back, and pierced the light shield of the formation not far away. Boom! In the loud noise, the god-slaying spear made another dent in the light shield of the formation, and many cracks appeared. Yu's body stiffened in the air, and there was a big bloody hole in his chest, which was penetrating from front to back. Black blood gushed out from the wound, and immediately dyed his armor and clothes. He lowered his head with difficulty and looked at his chest in disbelief, and his eyes were full of fear. He could not believe that he had been seriously injured by Ji Tianqing, and his internal organs had been shattered. In his chest, except for his heart, which was still intact, the other internal organs had been shattered. Such severe injuries had almost destroyed his physical body. Yu was furious and frightened. He immediately came to his senses, and used an escape technique to escape. At this point, he could no longer fight Ji Tianqing head-on. He had to escape from this place and find a place to heal his injuries. If he continued to fight, his physical body would soon be destroyed. At that time, he would have to heal for at least 100 years. However, just as Yu turned around and fled, a resounding dragon roar resounded from outside the grand formation. Roar! Immediately after, a deafening sound came from outside the formation. Boom! The northwest corner of the black light shield, which was already full of cracks, suffered another heavy blow. Crack! A crisp shattering sound rang out, and the black light barrier was shattered on the spot, and a huge gap appeared in it. Was Heli Yu. Heli Li Li Li. Then, a second dragon claw also reached in. The two dragon claws tore viciously, tearing a 10-mile-long crack in the black light shield. Yu, who was running away, was hit by the power of the formation again. He staggered and spat out a mouthful of blood. At this critical moment, he was calm and decisive. Since the sealing formation had been destroyed by the glazed fire dragon, he might as well give up on this formation and take back the formation disc underground. Swoosh! Under his control, the black feather formation disc buried underground quickly shrank to the size of a palm and flew back to his palm. He put away the formation disc and fled without looking back. How could Ji Tianqing let him go? Yu, don't even think about escaping. Ji Tianqing shouted angrily. He quickly put the black dragon into the sword world and chased after Yu alone. He turned into a golden stream of light and flew across the void like lightning, chasing Yu out of the desert. At the same time, the glazed fire dragon had torn the black light shield into pieces, and its huge dragon head went into the formation. Following a series of cracking sounds, the light barrier of the array formation within a radius of 50 miles completely collapsed and shattered. Torrential flames immediately surged in from all directions, turning the area into a sea of fire. The glazed fire dragon looked around and locked its eyes on Ji Tianqing, who was 30 miles away. Its eyes shone brightly. It seemed to be sure of something. It flew across the sea of fire as fast as a stream of light and rushed toward Ji Tianqing without caring about anything. Yu fled in front, Ji Tianqing chased from behind, and the glazed fire dragon followed Ji Tianqing. 2 people and 1 dragon passed through the desert and quickly disappeared into the sea of fire. 50 miles behind the glazed fire dragon, Yunyao and Ji by Xueqi also rushed over with all their strength. Everyone lined up in a line and started the chase in the desert. Granny Jean, the middle-aged woman, and Ronger were at the edge of the golden sand desert, cautiously observing a row of caves in front of them. Suddenly, Granny Jean noticed a strange aura in the desert and immediately turned her head to look. She looked through the raging sea of fire and saw the scene dozens of miles away. A 10-mile-long inferno divine dragon was chasing after a streak of golden light. She used her divine sense to look and found that the figure in the stream of light was the white-robed young man. This scene caused her eyes to light up, and she revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. "Great! I was worried that I couldn't find the glazed fire dragon's trace. I didn't expect it to show up on its own." It seems that the white-robed young man is very skillful to be able to lure the glazed fire dragon out. Jiayu and Ronger also released their divine sense to explore the situation in the desert. Seeing Ji Tianqing being chased by the glazed fire dragon, Jiayu was a little surprised and said with a strange expression, "Hey, that young man is really skillful to lure the glazed fire dragon out. But why is he being chased by the glazed fire dragon? Is he too weak to defeat the glazed fire dragon?" Ronger didn't think so much. She looked at Granny Jean with a worried face and begged, "Granny, that young man is being chased by the glazed fire dragon. Please help him. Although he is a peerless genius, he has just broken through the crossing calamity realm after all. He can't be the opponent of the glazed fire dragon. Now that he has lured the glazed fire dragon out, it is a good thing for us. If you help him now, you can make a good karma." Ronger was a little anxious. While begging Granny Jean, she also paid attention to the glazed fire dragon and Ji Tianqing's movements with her divine sense. Before she finished speaking, Jiayu showed a smile and teased, "Ronger, didn't you say before that you have no feelings for that young man? Why are you so worried about him now?" Chapter 1793. Granny Jean had been searching for the glazed fire dragon and had intended to capture the divine dragon. Hearing Ronger's pleading, she no longer hesitated and nodded in agreement. "Sai, you have always been calm and collected. Why have you become so impatient after arriving at the blazing mountain?" As she spoke, Granny Jean took Jiayu and Ronger and flew into the depths of the desert. While chasing the glazed fire dragon, Granny Jean did not forget to explain, "Of course I will capture the glazed fire dragon, but I am not doing it to save the white-robed man. Can't you see? That man is chasing an expert and the glazed fire dragon is chasing after them. With that man's means, I am afraid he does not need our help." Jiayu and Ronger did not agree with her and found it hard to believe. "This is impossible. Granny, no matter how powerful that man is, he is only at the first level of the crossing calamity realm. You think too highly of him." "Granny, the glazed fire dragon is at the half-step martial sage realm. Only a martial sage like you can subdue it." Seeing that they did not believe her, Granny Jean did not say anything more. After all, she did not have enough evidence and only guessed in her heart. 100 breaths passed. The glazed fire dragon was chasing Ji Tianqing and had reached the edge of the desert. It was about to enter a complicated cave. Granny Jean no longer hesitated and used the teleportation secret skill to catch up. "I will stop the divine dragon first. You two follow me." She instructed Jiayu and Ronger telepathically and teleported 50 miles away in a flash. In the next moment, her body flashed with golden light again and teleported 50 miles away to catch up with the glazed fire dragon. "Evil dragon, don't be presumptuous." Granny Jean appeared above the glazed fire dragon and waved the dragon head walking stick in her hand. 4 dazzling golden lights shot toward the glazed fire dragon. Swish! Swish! The 4 golden lights were like sharp swords that fell from the sky and pierced the glazed fire dragon's head, back, and tail. The glazed fire dragon sensed that something was wrong and its eyes suddenly became cold. Its body surged with heavenly fire and formed a layer of shield. Bang! 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 A series of muffled sounds exploded, reverberating fiercely in the desert. The glazed fire dragon didn't have time to dodge the attack of the golden light. It was hit on the spot and fell from the sky into the desert. Boom! The ground that was covered in golden sand was smashed into a crater that was dozens of miles in radius. Sand and stones flew everywhere. The entire desert began to tremble as if a super earthquake had occurred. The glazed fire dragon's shield was destroyed, but it was not injured. It hurriedly climbed out of the deep pit and looked ahead anxiously. Ji Tianqing chased He Yu out of the desert and into the maze-like cave. Seeing this scene, the glazed fire dragon roared again and again, letting out a vigorous roar. It turned its head to look at Madame Jean, its eyes full of hatred. Obviously, it hated Madame Jean for stopping it and delaying its pursuit of Ji Tianqing. Its intense anger and hatred caused its entire body to release a terrifying dragon's aura, causing a shocking hurricane to sweep through the desert. Swish! 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 Dozens of blazing white tornadoes immediately appeared out of thin air in the desert. The endless heavenly fire and the golden sand on the ground were all swallowed up by the tornadoes. A total of 36 golden tornadoes tens of thousands of feet tall spread out in all directions. Suddenly, the desert was filled with sand and stones. It was extremely chaotic. Madame Jean was also surrounded by tornadoes and was in the center of the storm. She was in a dangerous situation. Jieyu and Ronger had just arrived, but they couldn't get close to Madame Jean. They were blocked by dozens of tornadoes. Madame Jean was not flustered in the face of danger. She stood in the sky with a majestic aura and looked coldly at the glazed fire dragon. Glazed fire dragon, there's no need to pretend anymore. I have long seen that your vitality has been greatly damaged and your strength has greatly decreased. Give up resisting. You are not a match for me. Submit to me obediently, and I can spare you the pain of your flesh. In these thousands of years, you have slaughtered tens of thousands of warriors. You have sinned so much that you have aroused the hatred of the powerhouses of various races. Only by following me can I protect your safety and wash away your sins. Madame Jean held the dragon-headed walking stick and shouted righteously. Her voice contained the power of suppressing souls. However, the glazed fire dragon stared at her coldly with a contemptuous and mocking look. Hee hee. You ugly old hag, you're too funny. So what if my vitality has been greatly damaged? In these thousands of years, there are at least 8 martial saint experts who have died under my claws, if not 10. With your strength of the first level of the martial saint realm, you dare to boast so shamelessly? You want me to submit to you? The glazed fire dragon's mouth moved and let out a mocking sneer. Its voice was very clear, like that of a teenage girl, and its tone was full of confidence and dominance. Madame Jean was not angry. She stared at it with interest and said in a playful tone, "You are indeed proficient in the human language and can speak it. Then it will be easy. I come from the ancient sacred clan, one of the leaders of the 5 great profound sections. I have good intentions and will not kill easily. Now I will give you one last chance. Abandon the darkness and join the light, and submit to my clan. I promise you that I will make you the guardian beast of my clan, give you the best resources and treatment, and help you to break through to the martial saint realm as soon as possible." Madame Jin's action was a combination of kindness and coercion. She released the aura of a martial saint to intimidate the glazed fire dragon and promised many benefits to it. However, she underestimated the dignity and pride of the divine dragon. The glazed fire dragon sneered contemptuously. "A mere ancient sacred clan wants to recruit me? You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Even if the 3 martial gods come to invite me personally, I have to think about it. Stinky old woman, you can give up on this idea. Get out of my way, or I will tear the 3 of you to pieces." Alas! Madame Jean sighed with complicated feelings and said with a serious face, "Glazed fire dragon, since you don't know what is good for you, don't blame me for being rude." After that, she made a spell with her left hand and waved the dragon-headed walking stick with her right hand, drawing dozens of streamers in the sky. Draw a circle prism. The 60 or so streaks of multicolored light scattered around the azure flame dragon and burrowed into the golden desert. Suddenly, a colorful cage with a radius of 30 miles appeared out of thin air and suppressed the glazed fire dragon. Madame Jean used the 6 directions to heaven steps and waved the golden walking stick with the dragon-headed walking stick. She kept making secret seals to control the colorful cage to shrink quickly. She wanted to use this secret technique to imprison the glazed fire dragon and take it away. However, the glazed fire dragon also burst out with all its strength. It opened its mouth and spat out a dark golden dragon breath, which hit the colorful cage hard. Boom! Amidst a deafening explosion, a large hole was blasted open in the multicolored cage, and dense cracks spread out from it. The dark golden dragon breath condensed into a light beam and hit Madame Jean, sending her flying backward. Chapter 1794. At the edge of the golden sand desert, there were rows of wide caves. The caves were filled with strange rocks, and the ground was uneven. There were pits, cracks, and piles of rocks everywhere. Ji Tianxing chased after the heavily injured He Yu, passing through the golden sand desert and escaping into the cave. Originally, he could have caught up to He Yu very quickly. However, the terrain in the cave was complicated, and there were caves and tunnels of different sizes everywhere. It was also He Yu's first time here, and he was not familiar with the situation in the cave. He was forced into a corner, and could only escape in a panic, desperately escaping into the depths of the ground. This method was indeed effective. A full 15 minutes had passed, and He Yu had escaped thousands of miles into the depths of the ground, but Ji Tianxing had not caught up to him. After all, even he himself did not know where he would escape to in the next second, or which cave he would enter. Ji Tianxing was even more untraceable, and indeed could not catch up to him in a short period of time. Finally, the two of them entered the depths of the Earth's core. The complicated cave seemed to have come to an end. He Yu, who was escaping in front, suddenly stopped after coming out of a wide cave. His body stiffened on the spot, and his eyes were filled with fear as he looked in front of him, and his expression became ferocious. Ji Tianxing hurriedly chased after him, holding the sword of burial of heaven, and was about to launch an attack. However, when he saw the situation outside the cave, he also stopped in his tracks. Outside the wide cave, there was an empty space with a radius of thousands of feet. He Yu stood at the edge of the empty space, and in front of him was a bottomless abyss. This abyss was cylindrical, like a deep well magnified 1,000,000 times, and unfathomable. This super-huge deep well was straight and steep, and the bottom led to the mysterious depths of the Earth's core, and was enveloped by endless flames. The top of the deep well led to the surface, and was thousands of miles high, and was also filled with endless heavenly flames. The flat ground under their feet was only a huge rock protruding from the well. Compared to the huge abyss of flames, their bodies were as small as ants. Heavens! How could there be such a huge abyss in the depths of the Earth's core? He Yu looked at the abyss in shock and couldn't help but sigh. Ji Tianxing also looked around the abyss and thought to himself, legend has it that there is a real abyss in the world that connects the mortal world and hell. Only ghosts and gods can enter and exit it. There was actually such a huge abyss hidden in the depths of the mountain of flames. It really looked like the legendary netherworld abyss. The power and temperature of the flames here were about 5 times higher than the outside world. This was definitely the source of the colored glass heavenly flame. Could it be that this abyss is the true lair of the glazed fire dragon? Just as he was filled with shock and trying to figure out what was going on, He Yu had already come back to his senses and quietly flew into the abyss. He Yu passed through the raging sea of fire and released his soul consciousness, covering the rock wall of the abyss within 100 miles to search for the cave and the exit. Ji Tianxing was awakened by him. He quickly collected his thoughts and looked at him coldly. Seeing him searching for an exit in the abyss, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but sneer. Hey you, don't waste your energy. Don't tell me you still want to find the exit and escape from here? As he spoke, he pointed at the cave behind him and sneered. I have already checked just now. There is only one exit in the entire abyss. Now you are already a turtle in a jar. You can't escape even if you have wings. Just accept your death obediently. He Yu became even more anxious after hearing what he said. His left hand covered his chest that was bleeding profusely, and his right hand held the treasured sword as he flew up without any regard for his own safety. Obviously, he believed that the top of the abyss was connected to the surface of the mountain of flames. As long as he flew up along the abyss, he would definitely be able to escape from the abyss and return to the mountain of flames. However, how could Ji Tianqing let him do as he wished? You really won't shed tears until you see the coffin. He shouted coldly as he waved the sword of burial of heaven and charged towards He Yu as fast as lightning. Heaven-breaking sword. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed out a sword light that was hundreds of feet long. It broke through the raging sea of fire and slashed towards He Yu. He Yu was shocked. He quickly waved his treasured sword and swept out a few sword lights. Bam bam bam. The sword lights and the sword lights collided, creating a dull sound that reverberated fiercely in the abyss. The sword lights and sword shadows collapsed one after another and burst out in all directions, bombarding the walls of the abyss. However, the walls of the abyss were extremely hard. After the sword lights and sword chi hit them, they didn't even leave a mark. Ji Tianqing's attack failed. He waved the sword of burial of heaven again and slashed out an earth-shattering sword light that enveloped He Yu's figure. He Yu was held back by him and couldn't escape successfully. He could only resist with all his strength. The two of them engaged in a fierce battle in the abyss, both using their trump cards. Suddenly, the colorful brilliance of magic power flickered in the abyss, overshadowing the radiance of the raging sea of fire. The destructive shockwaves dispersed the sea of fire in a radius of dozens of miles, wantonly hitting the walls of the abyss. Rumble. Loud noises and explosions rang out one after another, echoing endlessly in the abyss. The two of them exchanged more than 100 moves before He Yu finally couldn't hold on any longer. His physical body was on the verge of collapse, and his magic power was almost exhausted. He was at the end of his rope. Ji Tianqing decisively used his trump card, becoming one with the sword, and charged towards He Yu with the mountain-sized white tiger phantom. White tiger sacred sword. The giant sword hit He Yu, and the mountain-sized white tiger phantom also drowned He Yu's figure. However, He Yu also activated the power of the innate He Yu formation disc to form a giant shield. Kaboom! Amidst the earth-shattering noise, the white tiger sacred sword shattered the black light shield and sent the formation disc flying. He Yu's physical body was also shattered into pieces by the giant sword, turning into pieces of flesh and blood that scattered in the abyss. After a short while, those pieces of flesh and blood were burned to ashes by the heavenly fire. He Yu's physical body was destroyed, and only his divine soul was left. He fled upwards in a panic. The white tiger sacred sword was also shattered, and Ji Tianqing was sent flying. His face was pale, and blood flowed out of his mouth and nose. His divine soul was also injured. After all, he had fused with the sword of burial of heaven. He would definitely be at a disadvantage if he fought against a tribulation-level magic treasure head-on. However, his injuries were not serious, and it did not affect his battle. Seeing He Yu's divine soul escape, he immediately chased after it, took out the 1,000-meter-tall golden sword, and slashed it fiercely. Bang! The golden sword carried endless divine power and shattered He Yu's divine soul on the spot. The dignified President He Yu, an 8th-stage tribulation-passing martial lord, was killed by Ji Tianqing just like that. He was obliterated forever. He Yu's physical body and divine soul, as well as his magic treasure and spatial ring, fell into the abyss and were burned to ashes by the heavenly fire. Ji Tianqing was also panting from exhaustion. He quickly withdrew the golden sword and prepared to leave the abyss to meet up with Yun Yao and the others. But at this moment, the voice of the burial of heaven sounded in his mind. Tianqing, it's already a great surprise that you can find this heavenly fire divine furnace. How can you leave just like that? Chapter 1795. Burial of Heaven's voice suddenly rang out, startling Ji Tianqing. He looked at the abyss of heavenly fire behind him, revealing a stunned expression. Burial of Heaven. This abyss is actually the heavenly fire divine furnace? It can repair the divine sword? Burial of Heaven said with certainty. Of course. Do you still remember the heaven and earth furnace in the Eastern Sea's returning ruins? Yes, of course. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a sudden realization. You mean this abyss of heavenly fire is the same as the heaven and earth furnace, a naturally formed furnace? Yes. Burial of Heaven said solemnly. If you want to repair the divine sword, other than a martial saint expert using a saint-level furnace, there is another way. It is to use this naturally formed furnace to smelt several materials and divine swords. I didn't tell you before because this kind of naturally formed furnace is too rare. I didn't expect your luck to be good enough to encounter a heavenly fire divine furnace here. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. Of course, this is the mountain of flames after all. The probability of a heaven and earth furnace appearing here is higher. Alright, if I use this furnace to repair the divine sword, how long will it take? At least 1 day, at most half a month. Burial of Heaven's answer was very short. This. Ji Tianqing hesitated and silently calculated. If I deliberately release the little black dragon and use it to lure the glazed fire dragon, it will definitely find me at all costs. If I repair the divine sword here and it suddenly disturbs us, won't all our previous efforts be wasted? Also, Yun Yao and Ji Bai Shohei are still in the desert. I don't know how they are. Burial of Heaven said calmly. I can enter the heavenly fire divine furnace to smelt it myself. If the glazed fire dragon comes, you can do your best to delay it. As for Yun Yao, she has the water reverse divine sword. You don't have to worry about her safety. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, Okay, I'll send a message to Yun Yao first and ask about the situation. It won't be too late to make a decision after that. After saying that, he took out a communication jade slip and sent it to Yun Yao. About 10 breaths later, the communication jade slip flew back and landed in his palm. He released his divine sense into the jade slip and immediately heard Yun Yao's voice. Tianqing, you don't have to worry about us. The 3 of us are very safe and are watching the battle in the Golden Sand Desert. The 3 women were currently fighting against the glazed fire dragon. The white-haired old woman in the lead was extremely powerful. She was indeed a martial saint. She stopped the glazed fire dragon, and the 2 of them are locked in battle. It won't end in a short time, and I'm afraid it will be difficult to determine the winner. After hearing Yun Yao's answer, Ji Tianqing immediately calmed down, and a playful smile appeared on his face. Haha, how interesting. That martial saint actually intervened at the critical moment and blocked the glazed fire dragon. The heavens are really helping me. This is going to be easy. After putting away the communication jade slip, he made up his mind. Burial of Heaven, I'll help you repair the sword first, and then I'll deal with the glazed fire dragon. Burial of Heaven replied, That's great. If you help me, I'll definitely be able to repair the sword faster. After that, Ji Tianqing held the Burial of Heaven's sword and flew toward the bottom of the abyss. The surging golden heavenly fire continued to emerge from the bottom of the abyss with terrifying heat, rising like a spring. The deeper Ji Tianqing flew toward the bottom of the abyss, the greater the impact he suffered, and the stronger the heavenly fire around him became. After 100 breaths, he flew down about 500 miles, but he still couldn't reach the bottom of the abyss. However, he was already very close to the bottom. Being in the sea of fire, the pressure was extremely great. The terrifying dark golden heavenly fire kept burning his magical power shield, causing dense cracks to appear on the shield. He had to use his magical power to repair the shield repeatedly. In this way, his magical power was greatly consumed, and he wouldn't be able to hold on for too long before he ran out of magical power. Burial of Heaven, this is already my limit. If I go any further, it will be very dangerous. Burial of Heaven said in a serious tone, It's enough to be here. Set up a sealing formation here and help me seal the glazed heavenly fire. Try not to let it leak out. Okay. Ji Tianqing agreed without hesitation. Then, he took out 4 materials from his spatial ring and placed them together with the Burial of Heaven sword. Burial of Heaven sword released a black light, enveloping the glazed true gold of heavenly fire, Yin Yang godly jade, golden crow copper marrow, and wind thunder meteoric iron. I'm going down. Set up the formation as soon as possible. After saying this, Burial of Heaven's sword flew toward the bottom of the abyss with the 4 materials. Ji Tianqing didn't waste any time. He hurriedly took out 6 fist-sized vacant stones and 8 pitch-black sharp shuttles from his spatial ring. These 6 vacant stones and 8 sharp shuttles were all high-grade tribulation-level treasures used to set up a formation. Ji Tianqing had kept these treasures in his spatial ring ever since he obtained them. He had almost forgotten about them. Today they finally came in handy. He stood in the middle of the sea of fire and formed a seal with both hands, sending out streaks of dazzling light. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Under his control, the dazzling light enveloped the 6 vacant stones and flew them in 6 different directions. Thump 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 thump. A series of dull sounds rang out. The 6 vacant stones hit the rock walls of the abyss and embedded themselves into the golden rock walls. Then, Ji Tianqing controlled the 8 black sharp shuttles to fly in 8 different directions and nail them into the hard rock walls. These vacant stones and black sharp shuttles formed the foundation of the formation. After setting up the foundation, Ji Tianqing began to cast spells. He waved his hands and sent out tens of thousands of dazzling lights, scattering them into the raging sea of fire. Not long after, a ceiling formation with a radius of 100 miles was formed at a speed visible to the naked eye. With the 6 vacant stones and 8 sharp shuttles as the foundation, tens of thousands of light pillars formed a huge 5-colored net that covered the entire abyss. Ji Tianqing focused on setting up the formation, interweaving tens of thousands of formation veins. About 4 hours later, the initial stage of the formation was completed. A 5-colored light barrier with a radius of 100 miles was placed in the abyss, releasing a powerful suppressive force. With the ceiling formation as a barrier, the celestial glass fire that emerged from the abyss was blocked inside. As more and more celestial glass fire accumulated, the celestial fire quickly gathered and fused together. Its power became more and more violent. The impact of the formation also became stronger and stronger. It constantly swelled and cracked. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to speed up the casting of spells and desperately perfect the 6 Unity 8 Extreme Sky Ceiling formation to prevent the celestial glass fire from leaking out. However, he was only at the Tribulation Transcendence realm. It was impossible for him to block the celestial fire of the entire abyss with just a tribulation-level formation. As time passed, the celestial fire became thicker and thicker. Its power also doubled. The ceiling formation kept leaving cracks and gaps. It became precarious and could collapse at any time. Chapter 1796. Unknowingly, another 2 hours had passed. Ji Tianqing had stubbornly held on for 2 hours. 70% of his spiritual power had been consumed, and his soul had become weak. Above the ceiling formation, there were only scattered golden flames in the air, and the temperature had dropped several times. Below the ceiling formation, there was an endless amount of celestial glass fire, which had already condensed into a dark golden cloud. The ceiling formation was withstanding an incomparably powerful impact. The 5-colored light shield was full of cracks, and could collapse at any time. Ji Tianqing had reached the end of his tether. He was extremely anxious, but there was nothing he could do. He could only pray silently, "Burial of Heaven, oh Burial of Heaven, it's been 6 hours. Why haven't you done anything?" Perhaps his prayer was effective, or perhaps the time was up, and the Burial of Heaven was ready. Clang! Suddenly, the crisp sound of a sword came from the bottom of the abyss, and a divine golden light burst into the sky. Then, a majestic and mighty devouring force came from the bottom of the abyss. Swoosh! Below the ceiling formation, the dark golden flame cloud was immediately swept down by the devouring force, forming a dark golden vortex. After a short while, Ji Tianqing could clearly feel that the flame cloud had decreased by 30%, and had become much thinner. The impact that the ceiling formation withstood was also rapidly diminishing. The many cracks on the 5-colored light shield also began to heal and recover. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's spirit was shaken, and he revealed a look of strong anticipation. Great! Burial of Heaven has finally begun to move. He looked at the bottom of the abyss with burning eyes, and released his divine sense to investigate the situation. Unfortunately, the dark golden flame vortex filled the abyss, blocking his vision and divine sense. As time passed, the flame cloud became thinner and thinner, and the flame vortex began to shrink. This undoubtedly meant that most of the celestial fire in the abyss below the ceiling formation had been devoured. Ji Tianqing could not see the situation below, but he could guess that Burial of Heaven must be smelting the sword body and materials. Very quickly, another 4 hours passed. Below the ceiling formation, the colored glass heavenly flame in the abyss had disappeared. Without the cover of the raging sea of fire, Ji Tianqing could finally see the situation below clearly. He could vaguely see the bottom of the abyss 100 miles below him. It was a sea of crimson magma with a hint of gold. A giant sword that was thousands of feet tall was floating above the sea of lava. The giant sword released a powerful devouring power, stirring up the calm sea of lava and causing it to churn violently, emitting golden flames that covered the sky and earth. But those flames were all swallowed by the giant sword. The gigantic sword was completely crimson in color. After devouring the endless heavenly flames, it had already been incinerated into a crystal-clear state. Not a single trace of impurities could be seen. As time passed, the giant sword continued to devour the heavenly fire, tempering itself. Originally, it was damaged, missing a section of the sword tip. However, Ji Tianqing discovered that the giant sword had already been smelted with 4 types of materials and was slowly transforming into a sharp sword tip. Even though he was 100 miles away, he could clearly sense the destructive power contained within the giant sword. His heart was filled with excitement and anticipation. He silently watched the sea of lava and the giant sword below, waiting for the moment when the divine sword was repaired. But not long after, he had used up too much of his dermic powers and was only left with about 20%. In desperation, he could only fly above the ceiling formation and sit on the 5-colored light shield to recover his dermic powers. After taking a few pills, he held a supreme-grade spirit stone in each hand and circulated his dermic powers to absorb them. Time passed silently. The abyss was silent. About 10 hours later, Ji Tianqing refined a few pills and absorbed a few spirit stones. His dermic powers had recovered to about 80%. At this moment, a dazzling divine golden light rose from the bottom of the abyss. Clang! A crisp sword chime reverberated endlessly in the abyss. Above the sea of lava, the 1,000-foot giant sword rose into the air and flew upwards. At this moment, it had been completely restored. The hilt was mysterious and heavy, the blade was straight and slender, and the new sword tip was also unparalleled in sharpness. When the giant sword left the bottom of the abyss and flew near the ceiling formation, it had gradually turned from a scarlet red to a black color. The terrifyingly high temperature gradually dissipated, and the giant sword kept shrinking. When Ji Tianqing was alarmed, he ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. The burial of heaven had returned to its normal size, only 3 feet long. Swoosh! With a flash of black light, the burial of heaven flew in front of Ji Tianqing and stopped. Ji Tianqing stared at the burial of heaven and immediately saw that the sword had been completely restored. Not only that, the entire sword was surrounded by a layer of mysterious black light, exuding an invincible and transcendent aura that looked down on all living things. In the past, the burial of heaven was not complete. Even though it contained great power and had a cold and mysterious aura, it had the aura of a hero past his prime. But now, not only had the burial of heaven been restored, but it was also filled with an indescribable divine aura. It was as if it had a life of its own and had completely awakened. Rather than calling it a peerless treasure sword, it was more like a peerless powerhouse that stood proudly between the heavens and earth, looking down on all living things. Ji Tianqing revealed a gratified expression, and his heart was filled with anticipation as he slowly reached out to grab the hilt. When his hand grasped the hilt, a telepathic connection arose spontaneously from his soul. At that moment, many memories seemed to have been awakened, and countless scenes flashed through the depths of his mind. Once upon a time, he had carried the burial of heaven and roamed the Shenwu continent alone. From west to east, he had defeated countless geniuses and powerhouses. His style was outstanding, and no one could rival him. Once upon a time, he had stepped onto Tianzhu Mountain alone and accepted challenges from various martial saints, but no one had been able to withstand more than 3 moves from him. Once upon a time, he had carried the burial of heaven and roamed the heavens, discussing the martial path with the martial god and giving pointers to the world. All kinds of memories surged forth like a tide and flashed through the depths of Ji Tianqing's mind. His emotions became complicated and heavy, and he stared at the burial of heaven with a burning gaze. He could not help but murmur, "Old friend, you're finally back." The burial of heaven's valiant aura and the black light on its surface were retracted, and it returned to its ordinary pitch-black appearance. Aside from being somewhat mysterious, it did not reveal too many shocking aspects. The burial of heaven's voice also rang out in Ji Tianqing's mind. He sighed deeply and said, "Yes, I'm back. In this life, we must not repeat the mistakes of the past. We must slaughter all of our strong enemies and kill our way to the 9 heavens." Ji Tianqing held the sword with his right hand, and 2 fingers of his left hand brushed across the blade. His expression was cold and resolute as he said, "When I return to the spirit realm, those who have betrayed me will be executed." The burial of heaven was silent for a moment before he added, "Don't worry, that day is not too far away. Before that, we must work hard to recover our strength as soon as possible." Ji Tianqing nodded and waved his hand to remove the ceiling formation. He then put away the 6 vacant stones and the 8 pointed shuttles. Chapter 1797. In the Golden Sand Desert. The battle that had lasted for an entire day had finally come to an end. The area within a radius of a few hundred miles had turned into ruins. Originally, this place was covered with golden sand and the ground was still quite flat. But now the area within a few hundred miles was filled with holes and gullies, and there were broken boulders everywhere. Half of the desert was destroyed, and it was a scene of devastation. Yun Yao, Ji Bai, and Xueqi hid at the edge of the ruins, silently watching the battle. In the middle of the ruins, there were 4 figures flashing and dancing in the sky. They were constantly releasing spells that could destroy heaven and earth, bombarding each other. The most conspicuous figure was the glazed fire dragon that was 10 miles long and completely red. Its body was wrapped in a layer of golden heavenly fire, and it flew as fast as lightning, releasing the brilliance of spells that covered the sky and earth. However, the previous day of fierce fighting had already exhausted its magic power, and it had suffered extremely tragic injuries. Its power was already very weak, and its body was covered with wounds. There were hundreds of bloody holes, blood grooves, and wounds of different sizes. Many of the wounds were deep, and the bones and organs inside could be clearly seen. Most of its dragon scales were broken, and one of its dragon claws was also cut off. Its injuries were extremely severe. Dark red dragon blood constantly gushed out from its wounds, covering its entire body. Much of the dragon blood that was spilled in the ruins quickly dissipated, turning into majestic and mighty dragon aura that scattered between heaven and earth. Although it was severely injured and was at the end of its tether, it still held on. After all, the divine dragon's pride did not allow it to admit defeat and surrender. Most importantly, it was not at a disadvantage in this battle. The situation of Madame Jean and the other 2 was worse and more dangerous than it was. At this time, Madame Jean was really at the end of her rope. Her clothes were ragged, and her white hair was disheveled like a chicken's nest. Her body was covered with wounds. Dark red blood had already dyed her clothes and white hair red, turning her into a bloody figure. Her magic power was exhausted, and her soul was also injured. She became muddle-headed and could faint at any time. Even the dragon head walking stick in her hand was broken by the glazed fire dragon, and its power was greatly reduced. Even though she was a martial saint, she had only advanced to the martial saint realm a few decades ago. However, the glazed fire dragon was a half-step martial saint and was also the most powerful creature in the world. A divine dragon. Of course, its battle prowess was extremely powerful. Fortunately, the glazed fire dragon's vitality was greatly damaged before the 2 sides started fighting. That was why the 2 sides were able to fight to a draw. If the glazed fire dragon was in its peak state, Madame Jean would definitely not be its opponent. Compared to Granny Jean, Jeyu and Ronger were in a slightly better situation. The 2 of them were also heavily injured. Their clothes were tattered, their long hair was disheveled, and their bodies were stained with blood. However, they were too weak to fight the glazed fire dragon head-on. They just wandered around on the flanks to help Madame Jean besiege the glazed fire dragon. After an entire day of fighting, the 2 of them had exhausted all of their magic power. Their souls were also extremely weak, and their battle prowess had fallen to the bottom. The reason why the 2 of them were able to survive until now without being killed by the glazed fire dragon was because of Granny Jin's protection. Suddenly, the glazed fire dragon retreated 10 miles away. Its huge body shrunk violently, and its whole body emitted an extremely terrifying and dangerous aura. Black cracks appeared in the sky in front of it, and gradually, a huge vortex appeared. Seeing this scene, Madame Jin's expression changed on the spot. She shouted anxiously, "Get out of the way! It's going to use its ultimate move." Jeyu and Ronger were about to rush up and take the opportunity to besiege the glazed fire dragon. Suddenly hearing Madame Jin's shout, the 2 of them were stunned for a moment and hurriedly retreated. However, their speed was too slow, and it was too late to retreat. The glazed fire dragon suddenly opened its mouth and let out an earth-shattering dragon roar. Roar! It did not hesitate to exhaust the last of its magic power to release a pitch-black vortex with a radius of 10 miles, which blasted toward Jeyu and Ronger. The huge black vortex was a void storm formed by the void crack, and it had the power to annihilate everything. Even a martial arts saint might not be able to withstand the attack of the void storm. As long as Jeyu and Ronger were hit by it, they would definitely be shredded into pieces by the void storm. There was no suspense. At the critical moment, Madame Jean was extremely worried. She was so angry that her eyes were about to pop out. Evil creature! She cursed in grief and indignation, and rushed over without caring about her own safety, blocking in front of Jeyu and Ronger. At the critical moment, her left hand shot out 2 rays of golden light, which wrapped around Jeyu and Ronger, and threw them dozens of miles behind her. She held the broken dragon head walking stick in her right hand, and shot out a huge golden light barrier in front of her. Kaboom! The pitch-black void storm violently blasted the 10-mile-tall golden light barrier, and an earth-shattering sound burst out. The incomparably sturdy golden light barrier could not withstand the attack of the void storm, and it collapsed on the spot. Immediately after, the void storm blasted Madame Jean, enveloping her figure. Boom! With a dull explosion, the void storm wrapped around Madame Jean and continued to fly forward for dozens of miles before gradually dissipating. A figure covered in blood fell from mid-air and crashed into the ruins with a plop, splashing countless pieces of gravel. Both Jeyu and Ronger stood in the sky, still in shock. They stared at the figure in the ruins, and both of them looked extremely angry and worried. Madam! The two cried out in grief at the same time, and rushed over desperately, landing beside Madame Jean. Madame Jean lay in the ruins, motionless, half of her body buried by gravel. Jeyu and Ronger hurriedly pushed the gravel away and dug Madame Jean out of the ruins. When Jeyu picked up Madame Jean, the two saw clearly that Madame Jean had lost an arm, and her whole body was cracked. There was not a single piece of intact flesh and blood. Her physical injuries were extremely tragic, and she was on the verge of collapse. Her spiritual injuries were also very serious, and she had fallen into a coma, unconscious. At this time, her life was hanging by a thread, and she was hanging on by a thread. Madam! Please wake up! Jeyu and Ronger cried out in grief, tears gushing out of their eyes, and their hearts were tightly clenched. But at this moment, the glazed fire dragon flew over from the sky. It stood above the two of them, staring at them coldly, and said in a low voice, "Arrogant and ignorant people, you dare to be my enemy, and you will die without a doubt. The old woman's time of death has come, and the two of you will be buried with her." As it spoke, it raised its huge dragon claw and was about to smash down and kill the 3 of them together. Although its spiritual power had been exhausted, and its combat power was extremely weak, it had no problem killing Madame Jean, Jeyu, and the others. Seeing the huge dragon claw descending from the sky, Jeyu and Ronger were unable to resist. Chapter 1798. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the 1,000-foot-long golden sword streaked across the sky and reached the side of the glazed fire dragon. Bang! The huge sword pierced the huge dragon claw with a loud bang, exploding with a muffled sound. Golden light splattered everywhere, and dark red dragon blood splattered on the ruins. Although the golden sword radiance collapsed, the huge impact sent the glazed fire dragon flying. It tumbled and fell 10 miles away, smashing into the ruins with a plop, splashing rocks into the sky. The earth shook violently, and the loud noise spread hundreds of miles away. Jeyu and Ronger thought they were going to die. They did not expect someone to save them and let them escape. The two of them hurriedly raised their heads and looked at the sky. They saw a handsome young man in a white robe rushing over at the speed of light. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, the young man in the white robe was above them. Ronger's body trembled, and she stared at him with mixed feelings. It's him! He is not a coward who is afraid of death. He saved our lives at this critical moment. Ronger was a little excited and murmured in her heart. Jeyu was still calm. She bowed to the young man in the white robe and said, "Thank you for saving us. May I know your name so that we can repay you in the future?" The young man in the white robe was Ji Tianqing. After he left the abyss of heavenly fire, he went through the complicated caves and went back the way he came. When he returned to the golden sand desert, he saw the glazed fire dragon releasing a void storm and severely injuring Madame Jean. He was too far away and could not save her in time. Seeing that the glazed fire dragon was about to kill them, he could not help but help. This was caused by the kindness in his heart. He did not want to repay the kindness. Hearing Jeyu's words, he said calmly, "It's nothing. It's not worth mentioning, and there's no need to talk about repayment. You too. This place is very dangerous. You should leave quickly and find a place to heal. Hearing his words, Ronger had a better impression of him. She thought to herself, he is indeed a man of noble character. He does not ask for repayment. This is what a chivalrous man should do. Jeyu did not want to give up and continued, even if you don't ask for repayment, you should at least tell us your name, right? Ji Tianqing did not expect her to be so persistent. He had to answer, I am Tianqing. Are you satisfied? Tianqing? Jeyu nodded and said, we will remember it. Thank you for saving our lives. Then, she carried the unconscious Madame Jean and flew to the edge of the desert with Fire, Ronger, who was seriously injured. As she flew away, she sent a telepathic message to Ronger. Ronger, this is all I can do for you. That man is called Tianqing. When we get back, let's check his background. As Ronger flew, she turned her head to look at Ji Tianqing several times, as if she wanted to remember his appearance in her heart. After a while, the two of them left the ruins and disappeared into the sea of fire. At this time, the glazed fire dragon struggled out of the ruins and flew back into the sky. It turned its head angrily and saw Ji Tianqing flying towards it with a sword in his hand. You despicable bastard! The glazed fire dragon recognized Ji Tianqing and was instantly enraged. It felt humiliated as if it had been made fun of. Because it was attracted by the aura of the divine dragon released by Ji Tianqing. Previously, it chased Ji Tianqing. It wanted to find the aura of another divine dragon, but it was stopped by Madame Jean. It fought with Madame Jean, but Ji Tianqing took the opportunity to escape. Now that it and Madame Jean were both injured, Ji Tianqing appeared again. It had to suspect that all this was Ji Tianqing's conspiracy. Ji Tianqing stopped 10 miles away from the glazed fire dragon. He stood proudly in the sky. His left hand was behind his back, and his right hand was holding the sword of burial of heaven. He pointed it to the ground, looking like a peerless master. Glazed fire dragon, the person you are looking for is me. Why do you have to kill them? He looked at the glazed fire dragon calmly and said in a serious tone. It would have been better if he didn't mention this. When it heard this, the glazed fire dragon was even more furious. Boy, you are really despicable, shameless, hypocritical and disgusting. Ji Tianqing frowned and asked with a puzzled face. Why do you say that? Are you seriously injured and about to die? Have you lost your mind? The glazed fire dragon glared at him with resentment. It was so angry that it laughed and scolded. Pretend! You insidious bastard! Continue to pretend! Pretend what? Ji Tianqing was so angry that he laughed and looked at it playfully. The glazed fire dragon was so angry that its nostrils were spitting fire. It asked in a sharp voice, Then let me ask you, did you release the aura of the divine dragon? Yes. Ji Tianqing nodded. The glazed fire dragon asked, So you admit that you deliberately released the aura of the divine dragon to lure me out? That's right. Ji Tianqing nodded again. The glazed fire dragon sneered even more coldly. It was full of resentment. You purposely used the dragon's aura to lure me out. Then, you ran away and used that old woman to deal with me. During this time, you were hiding in the dark. When the old woman and I both got hurt, you showed up again. What a sneaky and despicable bastard. You're a fisherman who benefits from the fight between the snipe and the clam. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing came to a sudden realization and understood what it meant. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He waved his hands and explained, Wait, it's just your imagination. It's not the truth. I didn't run away. I just chased after Yu all the way to the abyss of heaven flame. As for that old woman, I don't know her. How could she help me kill you? The glazed fire dragon sneered angrily. It's right that you don't know her. Because you don't know her, you despicable bastard, that's why you used her. Ji Tianqing was surprised again. He said firmly, It's all a coincidence. It's a misunderstanding. The glazed fire dragon didn't believe him. It said scornfully, Don't quibble. You're such a despicable, shameless, treacherous and hypocritical bastard. Even if I die, I won't surrender to you. Ji Tianqing sighed helplessly. He said indifferently, Since you can't explain it clearly, Then you can think whatever you want. Anyway, you're now a fish on the chopping board. I can do whatever I want to you. Your life or death is not up to you." As he said that, he waved his sword and stabbed 36 rays of sword radiance toward the 4 vital parts of the glazed fire dragon. Divine dragons were similar to humans. They also had weak spots and vital parts. It was just that ordinary people didn't know about them. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sky was full of sword radiance. The glazed fire dragon was shocked and immediately retreated to avoid it. However, it had used up all its spiritual energy and had little combat power left. It couldn't avoid it at all. Bang, bang, bang. With a series of muffled sounds, its vital parts were hit. Instantly, its spiritual energy was sealed. Its body fell to the ground stiffly. Chapter 1799. The glazed fire dragon's body lay stiffly in the ruins. Only its eyes and mouth could move. Ji Tianqing put away the sword of burial of heaven and landed in front of it. He looked at it with a smile. "Okay, now we can talk." How could the glazed fire dragon listen to him? It stared at Ji Tianqing with hatred and cursed in exasperation. "You despicable and vicious bastard. I don't want to hear your voice. I have nothing to talk to you about." Ji Tianqing was not angry. He continued to smile and said, "I think you know that I have no intention of killing you. We are not enemies. If you can calm down, we can talk. It will be good for both of us." "Humph. No matter what you say, I will not give in. I despise you, bastard." The glazed fire dragon snorted and despised Ji Tianqing. However, it had calmed down a lot. Ji Tianqing continued, "Isn't the reason why you showed yourself and wanted to find me because of that divine dragon? Don't you want to see that divine dragon? In the whole Shenwu continent, there are only a few divine dragons. You probably haven't seen any of them, right?" The glazed fire dragon fell silent. It did not refute or curse. After all, Ji Tianqing was right. It had not seen any other divine dragon since it could remember. When Ji Tianqing saw that it was much more tamed, he could not help but smile. He nodded approvingly and said, "That's right. You are a half-step martial sage after all. You should have the bearing and wisdom of an expert." The glazed fire dragon stared at him fiercely and said coldly, "Stop talking nonsense. Where is the black dragon? Ask it to come out and see me." Seeing that it was so anxious, Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry. He looked at it playfully and asked, "You can see the black dragon, but you have to answer a question first. It is said that you have passed through the 8 tribulations 1,000 years ago. With your bloodline and talent, you should have broken through to the martial sage realm by now. Why haven't you broken through yet? Why are you still at the half-step to martial sage realm? What does that have to do with you?" The glazed fire dragon glanced at him disdainfully and said in a contemptuous tone, "I am the king of the divine beasts, the noblest divine dragon. Even if I tell you, you won't understand." "Hee hee." Ji Tianqing laughed and said confidently, "To tell you the truth, no one on this continent knows the dragon clan better than me." The glazed fire dragon instinctively rolled its eyes, showing a look of disdain. However, it immediately thought of something, and the look in its eyes immediately changed, and it obediently shut its mouth. After all, Ji Tianqing had only used one move to accurately hit its 4 vital points, sealing it so that it could not move. Those 4 vital points were very well hidden and tricky, and only it knew about them. Ji Tianqing was also able to accurately identify it, which proved that he was not lying. He knew the dragon god very well. Seeing that the glazed fiery dragon was silent, Ji Tianqing secretly released his soul consciousness to check its body. After frowning and pondering for a while, an idea flashed through his mind, and he vaguely understood something. Hence he smiled and said, "Little fire dragon, you have passed through the 9th tribulations, but you are unable to break through to the martial sage realm. Based on your current situation, this is very strange, and it even goes against common sense. However, I can see some clues and guess the reason." The glazed fire dragon glanced at him coldly and said in a contemptuous tone, "Pretentious and deliberately mystifying. Aren't you trying to use this as a threat to force me to submit to you? Don't embarrass yourself with this little trick. I am not interested and I don't want to listen to your nonsense." Ji Tianqing did not argue with it. He put away his smile and said in a serious tone, Although you are a real divine dragon, your blood is not pure and it is mixed. If I am not wrong, there are at least 3 types of blood in your body. This means that your parents or ancestors have different blood attributes. Originally, when 3 different types of divine dragon blood are mixed, the baby dragon that is born must be gifted and demonic. After all, when the talents and advantages of different blood attributes are combined, there will be a qualitative change. However, it is a pity that you did not have parents to teach you when you were young, and you could not even come into contact with your own kind. There was no divine dragon to teach you cultivation, and no one who understood the divine dragon to guide you. Hence you went astray. When the glazed fire dragon heard this, it was stunned and a look of astonishment flashed across its eyes. However, it immediately returned to normal and said in a disdainful tone, "What you have said is not a secret. As long as you investigate my information and records, you will be able to deduce it." Ji Tianqing ignored it and continued to say, "You went astray because you did not have anyone to guide you. You could only rely on yourself and your talent to grow. However, the main reason was that you were wandering in the ruins of God and around the Blazing Mountain. Due to the special environment of the Blazing Mountain, the fire attribute blood in your body became unusually active and grew very quickly. You were overjoyed and thought that the Blazing Mountain was your cultivation sanctuary. You also believed that the fire attribute was your main bloodline. Hence, you worked hard and used the power of the Blazing Mountain and the Heaven Fire Abyss to grow step by step until you reached the Crossing Calamity Realm and became a glazed fire dragon." At this point, Ji Tianqing shook his head regretfully and said, "Unfortunately, you are wrong. You have 3 main bloodlines and the fire attribute blood is only one of them. As your strength continued to increase, the fire attribute blood became the dominant bloodline. However, the other 2 bloodlines also naturally awakened and became stronger, which began to restrict the fire attribute blood. It is because of the imbalance of your 3 bloodlines that your strength has been unable to increase. You have been stuck at level 9 Crossing Calamity Realm and have not been able to break through to the Martial Sage Realm." The glazed fire dragon remained silent and its emotions had calmed down. It quietly listened to Ji Tianqing's words. When it heard this, it could no longer suppress the shock in its heart. It looked at Ji Tianqing with its bright eyes and let out a cry of surprise, full of shock. You bastard! How do you know? How can you be so sure?" Ji Tianqing looked at it with a smile and said meaningfully, "I have just said that no one in this mainland knows the divine dragon better than I do. Not only do I know the root of your problem, but I also know how to solve it and help you break through to the Martial Sage Realm." If the glazed fire dragon had heard his words a moment ago, it would have snorted and mocked him. However, it was different now. Its biggest secret had been seen through by Ji Tianqing and it was shocked by Ji Tianqing's knowledge. For almost 1,000 years, it had been thinking about how to solve the problem of its bloodline. It had dreamed of breaking through to the Martial Sage Realm. Now that it had finally met a godly person and saw the hope of breaking through to the Martial Sage Realm, how could it not be moved? It looked at Ji Tianqing hopefully and asked carefully, You think? How can I solve the problem of my bloodline imbalance?" Ji Tianqing immediately revealed a triumphant smile. "You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.